Talia Roem is presented as the second princess of the Roem Empire, and the attendants admire her, saying she looks like an angel. A quiet pause follows as everyone takes in her appearance. Preparations continue around the princess, unseen and wordless. The attendants move with practiced efficiency to finish the morning ritual. The palace routine presses on, steady and methodical. One attendant insists that she truly looks exactly like Lady Cenobere. Another comments that with such careful dressing, she resembles Lady Cenobere at 18. The scene shifts quietly, focused on the final touches. Hands continue their work, arranging fabric and hair with care. Silence and small movements fill the room as the preparations proceed. While brushing is underway, she asks for her dress to be brought. An attendant stammers, calling attention to something she has found. They reveal that the dress is the same one Lady Cenobere wore when she first entered the Imperial palace. An attendant suggests the dress must have been prepared specifically for the princess. A brief, wordless moment follows as everyone absorbs the revelation. Talia wonders how her nanny could remember what her mother wore so long ago, surprised by the memory. The nanny insists she could never forget that day. She remembers Lady Cenobere as someone who did not seem to belong to this world, and says she was nearly moved to tears by her beauty. Even His Majesty, the Emperor, could not take his eyes off Lady Cenobere. A brief, wordless pause follows the recollection. Lady Cenobere tells them there is no time for nonsense and to finish dressing her, and an attendant replies that everything will be taken care of. The preparations continue in focused silence. Hands move efficiently to complete the final touches. An onlooker declares that she is truly beautiful. The room stays focused on her as the moment unfolds. No words interrupt the ongoing preparations. Attendants adjust final details with quiet concentration. Her presence fills the space while the finishing touches are made. The atmosphere remains solemn and attentive. The scene moves forward without any spoken interruption. A quiet transition carries the moment toward the next beat. Everything comes together as the preparations conclude. The memory settles, leaving only the present to return. The memory settles, leaving only the present to return. A sudden raw cry of pain slices through the quiet, pulling attention back to the room. Silence follows that outburst, a brief pause as the space absorbs the shock. The stillness holds for a moment, every movement and sound suspended. That pause breaks slowly as tension reappears in the background of the scene. A furious voice dismisses the matter as nothing but a filthy affair, full of contempt and refusal to take it seriously. The same voice complains of being sick of the mirror, expressing frustration with what it reflects. The speaker orders that a new one be brought, demanding a replacement without hesitation. Another voice recalls that even after the former Empress Bernadette died and Mother wore the. A quiet moment returns, the conversation pausing on that unfinished thought. Someone insists that that shameless sin will never disappear, the claim spoken with harsh certainty. Tension lingers in the air as the accusation hangs between the speakers. The mood shifts subtly, preparing for the next exchange. A firm declaration follows it will remain as long as the speaker exists, a vow that ties the sin to a living presence. A nervous voice begins to speak hesitantly, then quickly offers a compliment, telling the Highness they are truly beautiful. That courteous attempt meets the room's shifting attention, creating a brief ripple of reaction. An irritated order snaps at the talker to stop speaking nonsense and to move along, cutting the exchange short. The moment closes as the participants are urged onward, the scene settling back into the present. The present settles back into focus as the participants are urged onward, the moment shifting quietly into what comes next. A short pause holds the space, keeping the atmosphere steady while the narrative moves forward. Silence carries through the scene, a calm interval before the next development. The setting remains composed, giving way to the unfolding sequence without distraction. Time moves the scene along, each beat guiding attention toward the next moment. The flow continues smoothly, the present maintained as events progress. No obvious action interrupts the scene, which holds its place in the sequence. The narrative advances at an even pace, carrying the moment forward without fanfare. The scene maintains its rhythm, preparing for whatever appears next. Everything stays poised, the setting waiting for the next presence to arrive. The sequence remains steady, leaving space for the announced entrance to take place. The scene holds its breath in silence, focused on the approaching moment. Calm steadies the room as attention narrows toward the entry that was called for. The present remains centered, each element aligned for the forthcoming arrival. An announcement proclaims the entrance of Her Highness Talia Roem Querda, second princess of the Roem Empire, signaling a shift in focus to her arrival. The scene tightens its focus around the announced arrival, moving the narrative toward the moment she steps in. The scene tightens its focus around the announced arrival, pushing everything toward the moment she steps in. A hush settles as attention narrows and all eyes prepare for her entrance. Waiting stretches across silent panels, the room holding its breath before she appears. She pushes back with a bitter complaint, insisting that they treat her like the plague. Those nearby react to the accusation, eyes turning toward the newcomer. A voice cuts through the tension and demands to know what brings her here. Silence follows the question as the room waits for an answer. Faces tighten and whispers stir, the atmosphere charged with suspicion. Someone shifts and prepares to speak again, ready with a cutting remark. A sneering voice labels her as one of Isla's foolish followers, making the crowd's attitude clear. Murmurs ripple outward as people take in the insult and reassess her presence. Tension tightens further, the room closing ranks around the newcomer. She remains where she stands, the focus fixed on her amid the growing unease. A panel shows a strange mark and a garbled question that reads like a challenge about whether this is a place she is not allowed to be. After the strange mark and garbled challenge, the speaker insists this is their father's palace and that tonight's banquet is for their siblings. A quiet panel follows with no words to explain the next move. The scene remains wordless, giving a brief pause in the action. Another silent panel holds the moment without caption or dialogue. The panels continue without text, stretching the quiet between beats. The speaker questions what difference it makes if they are present, challenging the ban on their being there. A short, wordless moment follows as the question hangs in the air. An empty panel appears, offering no further explanation. The scene stays quiet and unresolved, with no text to guide the viewer. Silence continues across the panels, leaving the moment open. Another panel passes without words, keeping the focus on the visuals. The narrative holds a quiet beat, showing no dialogue. A brief, silent transition carries the scene forward. A voice notes that she is not here yet, marking an empty place at the event. The panels pause again without text, holding the anticipation. Silence fills the frame as the scene waits for what comes next. A quiet panel keeps the focus on the unfolding moment without words. The narration notes that after being so humiliated by that emetic, tension lingers in the room. Someone warns that they might not even see Isla Roem Querda today, casting doubt on her appearance at the banquet. The warning that Isla might not appear at the banquet still hung over the gathering, leaving tension in the air. The next panel contained no dialogue, letting the moment breathe. That quiet continued, the artwork offered no words to explain it. Another panel passed without speech, the scene focused on presence rather than conversation. No text appeared in this panel either, maintaining a steady, wordless pause. A single brutal command was shown, a stark demand for Isla to die. Voices doubled down on the hatred, insisting that Isla should die and begging that she never open her eyes again. Someone addressed her directly as Your Highness, bringing courtly formality back into the exchange. Another speaker noted that it had been a while since they last saw her, a casual remark amid the tension. This panel contained no dialogue, letting expressions carry the moment. The scene offered silence again, emphasizing the faces over words. A flatterer told her she grew more beautiful by the day, shifting the tone toward admiration. Someone tried to recall a man's identity and settled on Count Syrian as his name. A speaker asked if the mother had requested that they keep the princess company, framing the visit as duty. A courtier explained that Her Majesty, the Empress, was always worrying about the princess. After a brief silence, someone admitted that even without the Empress's request, they would not have been able to stop themselves from speaking to her. A voice urged her to take a look around, prompting awareness of the room. That panel carried no words, leaving the invitation to observe unspoken. Someone pointed out that every man present was looking at her, calling attention to the audience. They explained that most men stared because they did not want to get on the crown prince's bad side, then asked if she was an exception and confessed that their own heart had been bought long ago. Because of that circumstance, an attendant was assigned to serve the princess that night and treated the duty as a blessing in disguise. Someone asks whether mother intended to rescue the pitiful eldest daughter who would otherwise be left out like a black sheep. An aide explains that Her Majesty ordered them to help the princess fully enjoy the banquet. They add that Her Majesty also instructed them to do their absolute best to make the princess stand out more than anyone else in the hall. The attendant politely asks for the honor of a dance with the princess. A heavy pause follows, leaving the request hanging in the air. The moment stretches as everyone takes in the offer. Eyes in the hall shift and whispering ripples through the guests. Anticipation builds while the room awaits the princess's reaction. An impressed exclamation rises from the crowd. Attention narrows toward the source of that admiration. All focus lands on one man at the center of the room. Observers note that he is incredibly skilled, drawing everyone's eyes. The room continues to react, the display holding the guests' interest. Whispers and glances move through the hall as people process what they see. The atmosphere remains charged with curiosity and quiet excitement. Guests hold their attention on the scene, waiting for what happens next. The guests remained focused on the unfolding scene, waiting to see what would happen next. A formal announcement began to cut through the hush in the hall. A herald declared the entrance of His Highness Gareth Roam-Quirda, the great crown prince of the empire, and Her Highness Isla Roam-Quirda, the first princess of the empire. An onlooker noted that it was a shame their pleasant time had been interrupted. All eyes turned toward the newly announced figures as they entered. Silence and curiosity spread through the crowd as people took in the arrivals. The introductions named Isla Roam-Quirda as the first princess of the Roam Empire, and Gareth Roam-Quirda as the first crown prince of the Roam Empire and Isla's twin brother. Voices rose to address them as their highnesses and to offer congratulations. Congratulations echoed through the hall, followed by a formal acknowledgement and thanks from those on stage. A brief, heavy pause settled over the room. Some attendees remained silent, watching for the next move. Expectation lingered in the air as everyone waited to see how the situation would unfold. There was no immediate response, and the moment held. The scene paused, giving space for quieter voices to be heard. A low, personal remark finally broke the stillness. Someone insisted that they should not be compared to those others. An attendant observed that those two seemed determined to ignore the addressed highness entirely. The attendant pressed the matter, asking what the highness would do and whether he would go over to greet them first. The attendant suggested that greeting them was the very reason he had come. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. 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 A name is announced: Varkas Reedgo Shurkin, identified as the Supreme Commander of the Roam Imperial Guard. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. Varkas offered a formal greeting to His Highness, the Crown Prince. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. 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 The panel contains the text O0. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. A speaker asks whether it would be better to leave the banquet hall like this. Another speaker insists they did not come here to make such a pathetic exit. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. A speaker greets an esteemed brother. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. The speaker then addresses a lovely sister. The speaker expresses gladness that the other has safely recovered their health. Someone notes that the person had looked quite unwell before, followed by a pause. The other replies by thanking them for their concern. No visible dialogue appears in this panel. That person credits the other for helping them feel much better now. The one who had felt better credits the other person for helping them recover, acknowledging the change in their mood. A bystander wonders why the woman still wears that expression, saying it looks as if she is gazing at something completely worthless. A heavy silence fills the moment as everyone pauses. The scene shifts to the tense exchange that follows. Faces tighten and attention turns toward the newcomer at the center of the room. An offended woman lashes out, accusing the newcomer of daring to show her face and calling her appearance vulgar. The accusation grows harsher as another speaker claims the newcomer's mother behaved immorally and ordered her to seduce loyal subjects. The woman on the defensive replies that calling her vulgar is too harsh. She explains that the dress she is wearing once belonged to her mother on the day her mother first met His Majesty the Emperor. Moments pass as the guests absorb that explanation. She insists that the dress is very meaningful to her family. She adds that their father must have loved the dress very much. Someone begins to interrupt with an unfinished remark, the words trailing off. Another guest quickly responds that the dress looks very good on her. She thanks everyone for coming, acknowledging the guest's presence. She explains that today is a very meaningful day for them, and especially meaningful for her. She says that, if possible, she wanted to receive congratulations from as many people as she could. Her wish to receive congratulations from as many people as possible lingered over the gathering as plans moved forward. The official date for the marriage was finally set. On the day the season of wind begins, she would head east to become a member of the Shurkin family. Preparations continued quietly as the departure drew nearer. Before leaving, she planned to go on a pilgrimage to receive the saints' blessings, and because she had to depart before the weather grew too hot, today would be the last time they saw each other. She said she was glad to have seen them one last time at the Imperial Palace and wanted at least one final goodbye. Guests were invited to enjoy the banquet to their heart's content, since this day marked their final gathering together. Her sister spoke with sincerity, expressing a true wish to bless her future. Those words settled over the table, and the mood softened. Murmurs and quiet exchanges followed as everyone took in the moment. A brief, awkward pause interrupted the flow of conversation. After the pause, people resumed their conversations in softer tones. The evening wore on with gentle, measured movements around the hall. Another small, awkward silence passed as emotions surfaced and then settled. A guest vowed to pray every single day that she would come to look like this very soon. As the night drew to a close, the farewell held a quiet warmth born of genuine well wishes and the knowledge that departure was imminent. After the warm farewell, the tone shifts. A speaker vows to pray every day that the other ends up looking like news. A brief, unclear utterance appears on the page as Roman 2NOX, a single, fragmented sound. The scene holds for a moment without words, leaving space between the exchanges. Silence continues across the next panel, the atmosphere biding its time. Another quiet beat follows, with no dialogue to break the pause. An interrupted address appears as the single word "you," leaving the remark unfinished. A voice accuses the other of not being able to grasp that there is a line they should not cross. A blank panel separates the accusations, giving the exchange room to land. Frustration registers in a single sound, a sharp ugh from someone involved in the dispute. The next panel remains quiet again, the characters pausing between barbs. One speaker demands to know how low the other must stoop to be satisfied, the question loaded and direct. Another voice asks whether the other is still not happy even after hitting rock bottom, pushing the accusation further. A brief silent moment follows, giving weight to the sharp questions. Someone responds by questioning what is meant by rock bottom, turning the phrase back on the accuser. A speaker tells Lord Shurkin to stop acting so high and mighty, calling out arrogance by name. A challenge follows, asking whether the other even understands the bottom of human nature. Silence returns for a moment as the accusation hangs between them. One speaker admits that from the others standing they must look pretty low, acknowledging the harsh perspective directed at them. After admitting that they must look low from the other's vantage, the speaker insists they are still far from their worst. Their attention shifts to the other's eyes, a focal point that carries weight in the moment. A deep, dark abyss seems to lurk in those eyes, and the speaker fears that sooner or later the man will push them right into it. A tense silence follows as the realization hangs between them. The room remains still, the pause stretching without words. Someone speaks a single name, Varkas, bringing attention back to a person in the scene. The speaker asks to change their clothes and requests to be taken out of that place. The request hangs in the air, waiting for a response. A reply forms on the other side of the pause. Someone quietly agrees and says they will do as requested, granting the speaker's wish. After the assent, the scene begins to move forward. Action continues without words, panels shifting the moment along. Gestures and movement fill the space as they prepare to leave. A muffled sound breaks the quiet, a small exclamation in the midst of the bustle. A voice calls out to their highness, addressing the royal presence in the room. Someone suggests that it would be best to leave the banquet hall immediately. Despite the suggestion to leave the banquet hall, a loud voice objects, asking why and reminding everyone that the first imperial princess told them to enjoy the banquet to their heart's content. One guest insists they have not enjoyed themselves nearly enough and wants to keep celebrating, while another speaker respectfully addresses the highness but trails off in hesitation. Someone warns that a beast is glaring down from above, directing the warning toward the highness. A brief, uneasy silence follows the warning. The atmosphere remains tense as the room waits for the next move. No dialogue appears in this panel, emphasizing the pause. A quiet moment stretches across the scene. The panel holds that silence, building tension without words. A blank beat fills the frame, offering no spoken response. Someone utters the number 3, cutting through the silence. A voice stammers in shock, struggling to form a question. A speaker addresses the highness, asking what the meaning of this situation is. Silence returns for a moment as the question hangs unanswered. Another still panel follows, maintaining the build of suspense. A voice begins a statement, starting with the words that they are. The statement continues, declaring that they are barely tolerating the highness's existence. The room absorbs the harsh declaration in stunned silence. The speaker adds that this tolerance has been the case for a very long time, sealing the blunt rebuke. The speaker presses on, insisting they endured it repeatedly and without relief. Their voice doubles down, saying the endurance continued even beyond that, as if to drive the point home. A sharp grunt breaks the rhythm, signaling pain or strain from someone in the room. A faint, strained sound slips out, small and telling. A sudden gasp follows, heightening the tension in the moment. One speaker warns the little sister not to push things any further, and makes clear that their hatred for her is already more than enough. The panel offers no words, leaving the accusation to hang in the air. Coughing and another gasp punctuate the silence, showing physical distress or shock among those present. Another quiet panel lets the noise fade for a moment. Stillness remains, with no visible dialogue to counter the earlier rebuke. The scene holds its breath, leaving the characters to react off-screen. A blank moment stretches, emphasizing the impact of the words already spoken. Text appears instructing someone to keep this in anio, a terse order that demands attention. They point out the fact that the mother runs wild, using it as part of their reproach. They go further, calling her a filthy illegitimate child, and insisting that her freedom to roam the imperial palace is nothing more than temporary luck. The taunts keep coming, breaking into a garbled address meant for the highness, the words distorted and hard to make out. A light, mocking laughter follows, adding to the hostile atmosphere. A short, sharp chuckle cuts through the noise, small and pointed. A brief pause settles over the scene, a quiet beat between remarks. The moment stretches on, the tension lingering without words. Someone declares they will have to grow them out again, the statement left blunt and practical. The speaker vows to sharpen them even more this time, followed by a quiet, satisfied chuckle and a cold comment that they should pierce right to the bone, ending with an annoyed remark about the mess. Silence briefly returns as the words hang in the air. Another quiet beat follows, the group holding its posture. The scene remains still, the earlier taunts echoing in the background. A slow, heavy pause marks the space before the next exchange. Someone remembers that back then it had been a complete mess like this as well, tying the present moment to an earlier chaos. The memory continues with a loud announcement that finally the daughter's name will be recorded in the Imperial family register. The same voice declares that they have arrived and that this is the palace. The speaker urges Talia to be happy as the moment unfolds around her. The memory moves forward in quiet panels, holding the moment without words. A brief, wordless stretch of the memory lets the scene sink in. Silent images follow, showing the day continuing without narration. The panels stay still for a moment, keeping the focus on the unfolding memory. No words appear as the recollection shifts through the scene. The memory lingers on small details, shown without commentary. Talia admits that she is scared, the confession coming quietly in the middle of the memory. She repeats that she is scared, the fear surfacing again in the same voice. A silent beat follows the repeated fear, letting the emotion hang in the air. Her fear intensifies into an outcry, the memory capturing the moment of panic. The panels quiet again, showing the aftermath without words. The memory pauses on a still image, leaving the scene open and unsettled. Another silent panel keeps the focus on the lingering feeling from that day. The recollection explains that it happened when her mother was erasing every trace of the former empress. The memory continues in quiet images, shifting to the next fragment of that time. A sequence of wordless panels suggests the scene moving forward without explanation. Someone asks whether it fell from a tree, a simple question that slices through the silence. The memory holds on that question, ending the sequence with a quiet, unresolved moment. The unresolved memory is suddenly interrupted by a sharp, unexpected cry that breaks the quiet. The shout dwindles into a quieter, trembling exclamation, the sound losing force as it fades. A frantic, jumbled call tries to force attention, the words coming out scrambled but urgent. A person lets out a low groan, then angrily dismisses any concern for bird, insisting it does not matter. A small bird replies with a steady, simple chirp, its soft sounds filling the space between people. The panel falls quiet, leaving a brief pause in the exchange. A long, wordless pause stretches across the scene, the silence held like a breath. A voice asks, uncertain whether it might already be dead, the question hanging in the air. No words follow immediately, the moment lingers without resolution. Silence continues to fill the frames, stretching the memory a little longer. The scene remains still, showing no additional speech or movement. An empty panel holds the quiet, leaving the question unresolved for another beat. The sequence pauses again, the lack of words emphasizing the uncertain mood. Thoughts and sounds both settle into a hush, the picture offering no answers. The scene keeps its quiet, each frame holding onto the unresolved feeling. Stillness persists, the memory refusing to move past the lingering uncertainty. Someone reaches out with concern and asks if the other person is cold, introducing a softer note to the moment. The question hangs unanswered as the sequence holds on that fragile, unresolved instant. The question hangs unanswered, and the moment stretches on in a fragile, unresolved instant, held in a long, silent beat. Silence deepens around that pause, giving no clue or movement to break the stillness. The sequence remains fixed on the unresolved moment, offering no answers and keeping the tension taut. Time feels stalled as the frames hold, waiting for something to change. A loud voice demands to know what someone is doing down there, cutting through the silence with sharp urgency. For a moment, only the lingering quiet answers and the tension remains. The visuals stay tight on the unresolved beat, refusing to reveal any immediate reaction. Nothing shifts in the scene, the hold on the moment continues without relief. An uneasy stillness persists, as if everyone is waiting for a reply that has not yet come. The camera remains fixed on that fragile pause, stretching it into a long, tense beat. No resolution arrives, the silence lengthens, and the question hangs heavier. The atmosphere stays taut and expectant, holding back any movement or answer. Breathless quiet fills the sequence, emphasizing how unresolved everything remains. Every frame remains hushed, preserving the central question without relief. A strained reply comes through, saying they cannot get out, and the helplessness breaks the stillness. Another voice snaps in frustration, asking why the person even went down there in the first place, pushing the scene toward confrontation. The snapped voice pushes the scene toward confrontation, raising the tension between the speakers. A tense silence follows as neither side answers right away. The atmosphere remains tight, waiting for the next move. A firm command orders someone to grab on. Hands move to follow the order, reaching for support. No clear reply is heard in the pause that follows. The sense of urgency in the moment grows more pronounced. One person says they cannot because they are holding something, and then asks whether that object is important. The other replies that it is not really important. The first insists that the object should be dropped, but the one holding it says they cannot let go. A heavy pause follows as neither side finds an immediate solution. Tension lingers in the quiet between them. Suddenly someone screams, cutting through the silence. Everything stills in the immediate aftermath of the outcry. Another voice snaps for them to hold still, trying to take back control of the moment. A sharp voice orders someone to stay still, stopping the action in its tracks. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 A character exclaims that the situation is the worst, showing clear frustration. This panel contains no dialogue. The speaker explains that the problem happened while the other person was helping and offers to compensate by buying a much more expensive replacement. The speaker calls out the name Uchais, promises to tell a servant to give a generous reward, and declares being the daughter of a very, very powerful person. Only an ellipsis appears, marking a quiet pause in the exchange. One character criticizes another for acting arrogantly over such a small matter. A bystander stammers in outrage at a man's behavior toward the emperor's daughter. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 Someone asks what the other person is holding, calling attention to the object in hand. This panel contains no dialogue. This panel contains no dialogue. This panel contains no dialogue. A speaker questions whether it is a bird, then explains that it is because of Muddywaiter and begins to say originally. Someone admits that it might have been prettier. This panel contains no dialogue. This panel contains no dialogue. One voice notes that the other person's fingers are cold as ice. A speaker asks how long the other has been standing there. A pause fills the panel, then a speaker begins with "you know." Someone points out that there is a silver crown in the other person's eyes. This panel contains no dialogue. The panel shows only an ellipsis, leaving a long, quiet pause. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 A voice urgently calls out to the lady. This panel contains no dialogue. A voice calls for the nanny. Speech fragments appear, showing a trailing E followed by a single I. The speaker says that they have to go now. This panel contains no dialogue. The panel shows only prolonged ellipses. This panel contains no dialogue. This panel contains no dialogue. The panel displays a brief line of ellipses. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 A voice notes that it is cold. The panel shows a garbled line of text that cannot be read clearly. A voice asks whether someone will take it with them. The speaker begins with because and leaves the sentence unfinished. The speaker explains that their hands are too cold and that the other person is warm. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 Someone asks whether that bird will live. A reply appears that simply answers yes to the question about the bird's fate. The next panel states that it will live, giving a clear assurance about the bird. This panel contains no visible text or dialogue. No written narration or speech appears in this frame. There is no dialogue shown in this panel. This panel shows no visible text. No narration or speech appears in this frame. This panel contains no written dialogue. There is no text present in this panel. No visible narration or speech appears here. This frame contains no dialogue or captions. There is no written text in this panel. No dialogue or narration is shown in this frame. This panel contains no visible text. The speaker wonders whether he is watching them leave, expressing a quick moment of uncertainty. No text appears in this panel. This final panel contains no visible dialogue or narration. The panel contains no visible dialogue or narration, leaving the moment visually quiet. A second panel also shows no spoken words or captions, maintaining the silent beat. An exclamatory voice demanded where the person had been, breaking the silence with urgent reproach. The speaker scolded that Lady Cenobere had been searching for them, emphasizing how much concern had been caused. The speaker pointed out the person's disheveled state and insisted they must go see His Majesty soon, asking how the clothes had become so dirty. The person answered that they had tripped while taking a walk. Another voice reacted incredulously to the idea of a walk in that weather, criticizing the choice to be out at all. The panel returns to silence, with no visible dialogue or narration. Again, the scene shows no spoken words or captions, letting the visuals carry the moment. The final panel contains no visible dialogue or narration, closing the sequence on a quiet note. The final panel contains no visible dialogue or narration, closing the sequence on a quiet note. Voices call out in confusion over directions, one person asking if this is the place while another insists to go the other way. A sharp order demands someone stop immediately, followed by an announcement that the entire Imperial Palace is in an uproar. A brief pause follows, setting up the explanation for the sudden commotion. An official voice explains that in just a few days, the first princess and the crown prince will be setting off on their pilgrimage. The news settles in the palace as preparations begin to respond to the upcoming departure. Travel preparations are being organized specifically for two people, the first princess and the crown prince. The scene shows no visible dialogue, leaving the focus on the ongoing preparations. A name is announced: Warkas, identified as the commander of the Imperial Guard. No dialogue appears in this panel, giving space for the introduction to take hold. This panel contains no visible text, continuing the quiet visual pacing. There is no dialogue or narration here, keeping the focus on the unfolding preparations. The sequence closes with another silent panel, leaving the scene poised for what comes next. Silence lingers after the previous panel, holding the moment steady before anything else unfolds. A long, wordless pause stretches across the page, the kind of quiet that makes the next thought heavier. A memory surfaces. It had been raining the same way on that day as well. The panel holds that recollection in silence, offering no words to soften it. Regret follows. The speaker admits they should have simply followed him. Another quiet panel stretches the feeling of regret into stillness. The speaker acknowledges that they never crossed paths with that boy again. The scene falls quiet once more, leaving the memory to hang in the air. A simple observation follows it is cold. The cold settles over the panel, met by another brief pause. A guiding voice breaks the hush, directing them to come this way. The direction hangs in the air, unanswered for a moment. An empty panel follows, giving space for the instruction to sink in. The quiet continues, paced by small, unspoken movements. All visuals hold still for a moment, waiting for the next beat. Sudden surprise bursts out, breaking the silence with an abrupt exclamation. Silence returns, and the sequence closes on a tense, quiet beat, poised for what comes next. Silence holds for a moment, then a bystander breaks it by asking if anyone knows who that person is, pulling attention back to the crowd. Someone answers that those are apprentice knights training to join the Imperial Guard, and that they are all sons of prestigious noble families. Another voice points out a particular one over there, drawing focus to a single figure among them. A companion reminds him that His Majesty is waiting and urges them to go, pressing the matter to avoid further delay. They begin to move, the crowd shifting as the group prepares to leave. He complains that his father, the Emperor, has no interest in him, the words carrying a sharp ache. He lashes out, telling his mother to stay away from him, the distance between them made plain. The mother insists that from now on he must learn the etiquette of the Imperial house, setting a strict new expectation. Someone points out that the Emperor will not even look at her, highlighting the cold indifference that haunts their interactions. She says she has secured several excellent tutors for him, promising support in his education. She laments that even though she looks exactly like the mother he loves so much, she still commands him to come to the main palace before noon to attend. She warns that he will need to give his absolute best to catch up on the studies he has missed, stressing the effort required. A brief hush follows as those instructions land, the moment settling into a quiet pause. The group moves on with a tense stillness, each person carrying the weight of the orders just given. Footsteps fade and conversations lower, the scene contracting into a focused, expectant calm. Silence returns, closing the sequence on a tense, quiet beat and leaving the moment poised for what comes next. Silence shifts and a single lingering question appears, asking whether he will be there tomorrow as well. The next panels offer no words, leaving the moment to breathe in quiet. Frames hold on stillness, carrying the unspoken feeling forward. The sequence remains wordless, the visuals guiding the reader without dialogue. A quiet beat stretches across the pages, steady and unchanged. No text interrupts the flow, and the scene moves forward in silence. Visuals carry the moment, focusing attention on small, wordless details. The panels unfold quietly, each image leading to the next without comment. A smooth transition of scenes keeps the pace gentle and unobtrusive. Stillness lingers across these frames, calm and unbroken. The narrative remains quiet here, giving space to the moment. No dialogue appears, and the story advances through imagery alone. Empty panels maintain the calm between beats, uncluttered and clear. The sequence stays wordless, guiding the reader to the next moment. Silence frames the action again, steady and restrained. After that day, the student was able to see him every time lessons were attended. The following panels remain quiet, carrying that new pattern of meetings forward. The sequence closes on a calm, wordless note, leaving the moment poised for what comes next. The calm, wordless moment holds on, the panels lingering in quiet anticipation as the story moves forward. That quiet continues, the scene shifting without sound while tension slowly builds beneath the surface. The silence stretches into another panel, giving space before a new voice breaks it. A voice asks whether it was buried somewhere, then questions whether Oro got healthy and was allowed to fly far away. Another voice demands to know what someone could be looking at so intently, cutting through the lingering quiet. Silence returns for a moment, the panels holding that question in the air. The pause continues, a brief stillness before the next reaction. A stammered call for mother breaks the quiet, the single word spoken with urgent trembling. The scene falls silent again, the sudden cry echoing in the hush that follows. A short, quiet beat holds the moment, letting the reaction settle. Someone identifies him as Grand Duke Shirkin's son, the name spoken with clear recognition. That revelation hangs over the panels, shifting the mood and drawing new attention. A voice asks whether the person wants that child, and the question is met with stunned exclamations that ripple through the scene. A voice from the crowd shouted the name Grand Duke Serkin, the name cutting through the commotion. An observer assumed he must be the scion of some high-ranking noble family, but the thought was left unfinished. This panel contains no dialogue. A voice asked whether anyone wanted that child, the question hanging in the air. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 Laughter exploded across the scene, and it was met by frantic cries of no. This panel contains no dialogue. 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 The speaker said that if they wanted him, he could be given to them as a gift. This panel contains no dialogue. This panel contains no dialogue. The speaker added that the offer would not come free, making the terms clear. The speaker made the condition clear: to receive a prize, one must first learn to please their parents. The panel follows without any visible dialogue. Another quiet panel appears, showing no written text. Silence continues on the page, with no caption or speech. The story pauses on a panel that contains no dialogue. A blank moment follows, presented without words. The scene remains wordless, allowing the visuals to speak. A sudden outcry breaks the quiet as someone cries out in confusion, demanding to know why. The moment shifts to a panel that carries no text. No dialogue appears in this panel, and the pace remains subdued. A silent panel follows, offering no written lines. The story continues in quiet panels without speech. Another panel appears without any dialogue. The character admits to feeling scared, the fear clear in their voice. The next panel presents no text, holding the moment. The character explains the reason for the fear: their mother was there with them. A quiet panel follows, containing no written dialogue. The scene continues without any caption or speech. Another silent panel holds the visuals without text. The page moves forward in quiet panels that contain no dialogue. The sequence ends on a final panel that offers no written lines. The sequence continues from a final panel that offered no written lines, leaving a quiet pause between moments. That silence carries into the next panel, with no dialogue to fill the space. Another panel holds the quiet, letting the scene breathe without words. The calm continues in the following frame, still free of written lines. Silence persists, keeping the focus on unspoken movement rather than speech. The next panel remains wordless, extending the quiet pause in the sequence. The scene holds its breath for a moment longer, still without dialogue. Another silent panel follows, maintaining a steady, wordless flow. Urgent voices insist that they must find her, and that urgency shifts the pacing into motion. After that outburst, the scene returns to a brief quiet, giving space for what comes next. One person asks where she went. Another replies that she will come back on her own, offering a measured counterpoint to the earlier panic. The narrative takes a short, wordless beat, letting the responses settle into the scene. Silence returns once more, carrying the moment forward without written lines. The following panel remains free of dialogue, sustaining the quiet atmosphere. The sequence closes with another silent frame, letting the situation hang in stillness. The last silent frame lingers, and the stillness continues to hold the moment without change. Silence stretches across the scene, the atmosphere refusing to move for a beat longer. Pain surfaces in clear words. The character realizes their legs hurt, and that discomfort anchors them to the moment. The camera holds on the aftermath, the quiet space keeping attention on the character's slow recovery. No new movement interrupts the scene. The stillness carries the scene forward without comment. An extended pause follows, a string of ellipses that lets the tension hang without words. The character questions their fixation, wondering why they became so obsessed with this in the first place, then remembers meeting him once. Silence returns, giving the character a moment to sit with that brief memory. A single, firm refusal cuts through the thoughts as the character answers no to whatever question lingers unspoken. The scene relaxes again into quiet, letting the simple denial settle in the air. No action follows immediately. The moment remains steady and controlled. It is noted that he could have simply walked on by, but he did not, and that choice shifts the scene's weight. The focus pulls back slightly, leaving the consequences of that choice to settle into the background. Another quiet frame holds, steady and observant, as the story breathes between beats. The sequence closes this stretch with silence again, the scene poised and waiting for what comes next. The silence from the last beat continues, the scene holding its breath and refusing to move. Stillness fills the panels. No action interrupts the quiet that hangs in the air. The pause stretches on, every frame waiting without resolution. Text appears, cutting through the hush and asking whether they should just go back. The question hangs unanswered, leaving tension to settle in the empty space. Silence returns, heavier now, as if the scene is absorbing the doubt. Nothing shifts. The moment remains poised between motion and stillness. The pause persists, each panel holding the same quiet tension. The sequence closes this stretch with silence again, the scene poised and waiting for what comes next. The quiet from the last beat lingers, the scene still poised and waiting. A sudden shout breaks the hush. Someone announces that they have found her. The declaration hangs in the air, pulling attention and shifting the moment. A panicked voice stammers, urgently calling for the other to wait. A short pause follows, a hesitation in the middle of the commotion. Someone interjects, asking for just a moment to be given. Another voice questions where she is rushing off to like that, confused by her haste. The question hangs unanswered as people strain to follow what will happen next. A sharp cry cuts through the scene, breaking the fragile pause. Silence follows the outcry, the moment settling back into stillness. No one answers immediately, the scene holds its breath. A long, wordless pause fills the space, marked only by quiet. Moments pass in silence, each beat waiting for the next movement. The hush remains, with every action momentarily suspended. The stalemate continues, unresolved and still. No clear movement breaks the quiet, the scene waiting for direction. The characters remain poised, held in the same silent beat. A cautious calm settles over the moment, fragile and watchful. Silence holds steady again, every presence waiting for what comes next. The sequence closes this stretch with silence once more, the scene poised and awaiting the next turn. The quiet lingers over an empty panel, the story holding its breath as it waits for the next movement. A bare frame follows with no words or figures, extending the pause and keeping the pace slow. Another still panel maintains the hush, letting the silence grow without interruption. The sequence remains visually minimal, offering no new text and keeping attention on the calm. A quiet moment holds the page, restrained and patient in its lack of action. Empty panels continue to mark time, each one echoing the same stillness. The hush persists across frames, keeping the atmosphere steady and unhurried. A calm beat bridges the panels, subtle and unobtrusive as the narrative pauses. Silence remains the dominant element, carrying the scene forward by restraint. The page holds a long, quiet moment, measured and slow in its progression. Stillness fills the frame again, steady and uncomplicated, with no dialogue to interrupt it. No new images or words appear, and the calm simply continues across the next panel. The flow stays minimal, emphasizing quiet over movement as the sequence unfolds. Empty frames keep the moment restrained, preserving the pause until something changes. The narrative maintains its slow tempo, each panel reinforcing the same hush. A quiet continuity links these frames, the calm moving forward with gentle consistency. The silence is steady here, the panels mirroring one another in simplicity. Blank space carries the moment, keeping the story in a deliberate, unspoken pause. The hush stretches on, patience taking up the page as the scene waits for its next beat. At last, a single short greeting appears as text, presented without attribution and coming from an unidentified speaker. After the single short greeting appears, the panel contains no other text, leaving a quiet pause. A row of dots fills the space, signaling a long, silent beat. An unidentified voice asks if the other recognizes them, then admits that they were a mess back then. A caption places the moment a few months ago, marking a shift in time. No text appears in this panel. No text appears in this panel. Someone calls out to John, and another voice sharply objects with a short, urgent refusal. No text appears in this panel. A desperate plea addresses Barkeys, begging for action. The speaker orders Barkeys to drive that girl out and insists that she must not be allowed to set foot in the place. The command sharpens into a single demand: make it so the speaker never has to see her again. No text appears in this panel. 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 A final voice erupts with a forceful command: ordering someone to get out immediately. The forceful command cuts through the room, and a heavy silence follows as everyone reacts to the order to get out. A stunned voice erupts in disbelief, demanding to know what is going on. Another person calls out, asking what is happening and trailing into a confused why. For a brief moment, no clear words come from the crowd as the tension holds. That silence stretches, making the next outburst feel louder by contrast. The charged pause continues, setting the stage for renewed chaos. Confused murmurs turn into unclear sounds, followed by a strained groan from someone nearby. A furious voice lashes out at Jinno, accusing him of insolence and outrage. The speaker berates the intruder, insisting that someone like him has no right to set foot in this place. The anger sharpens into a single, violent command telling the intruder to die. Shouts multiply and intensify, repeatedly demanding that the intruder just die. Someone urgently calls out to Your Highness, the alarm in their voice cutting through the chaos. A furious voice orders the filthy intruder to disappear, the insult adding venom to the command. The furious voice had ordered the filthy intruder to disappear, the insult adding venom to the command. Others replied that Gareth could hardly be blamed for his anger, pointing out that it had only been 6 months since Empress Bernadette passed away. A sharp demand for silence cut through the room, immediately followed by a brusque question asking what of it. The speaker clarified that those children were the speaker's elder half-sister and elder half-brother. A name was spoken plainly: Varkas Ridogo Shurken. It was noted that the late Empress and the boy named Varkas were distantly related. Someone added that the Empress had taken great care of Varkas after he entered the palace. Another admitted they had only just learned his name. It was suggested that Varkas might see the mother as his enemy. Someone cried out no in sudden refusal. Someone cried out no in sudden refusal. A harsh curse answered the denial, the word filling the space with raw anger. The reaction left a brief, heavy silence that settled over the room. Tension stretched across the moment, every face frozen as the scene held. No words came for a beat, and the atmosphere stayed charged and uneasy. The bathwater was described as cold as ice, another detail of the hardship being recounted. Rough hands were named next, adding to the list of indignities endured. Even the food had gone cold, a small but telling sign of neglect. All of it was called punishment, the speaker framing every hardship as intentional retribution. Those accusations lingered in the air, weighing on everyone present. A single broken name slipped out in response, the word mother carrying ache and plea. Someone invoked Her Majesty Empress Bernadette Wasso, insisting she had been kind and was not meant to die in such torment. Other voices attacked the claimant's identity, declaring she was not a real princess and calling her the filthy fruit of an affair. A separate voice asked if that treatment was not too cruel, questioning the severity of the words. The room paused again, the conversation stalling as listeners absorbed the accusations. Faces shifted, and a tense stillness replaced the earlier outbursts. No one immediately moved to reply, leaving the claim and the counterclaim to hang. Only the echo of recent words remained, reverberating through the quiet. A long, trailing pause stretched out, marked by an almost audible hesitation. The scene held on that stillness, the weight of accusations and pleas unresolved for the moment. The scene held on that stillness, and the misery only worsened. The weight of accusations and pleas stayed unresolved as the quiet stretched on. Silence persisted. Nothing shifted in the room, and the uneasy pause simply continued. The hush held steady, leaving the moment suspended without any clear resolution. Stillness remained. No action rose to break the paused scene. Time moved slowly in that quiet, each second reinforcing the unresolved tension. A fragmented phrase appeared in the air, reading as ku lo ip, a broken line that did not resolve into a full meaning. The fragment faded into the silence, and the stillness reasserted itself. No reply came. The atmosphere stayed heavy and unchanged. The moment remained suspended, with nothing to move it forward. Quiet continued to dominate the scene, keeping all questions open. The pause stretched on, every second reinforcing the lack of resolution. No one spoke, and the unresolved emotions simply hung in the air. The stillness continued to hold the moment captive, leaving everything unsettled. The atmosphere did not shift, the scene remained in that same tense quiet. Silence kept its grip, and the unanswered questions lingered without change. The hush persisted, and the moment stayed poised between accusation and plea. Stillness held firm, preserving the unresolved tension for the time being. The quiet remained unbroken, leaving the situation open and unsettled. The scene stayed frozen in that unresolved silence, the weight of what had been said and left unsaid lingering in the air. The unresolved silence held a moment longer, the weight of what had been said and left unsaid still hanging in the air. That quiet stretched on, giving space for hesitation and thought. No sound disturbed the stillness, the room remained motionless for a beat. Time seemed to slow inside that pause, the hush growing deeper. Something shifted at the edge of the quiet, as if attention had turned. A sense of expectancy settled over the scene, waiting for the next move. The atmosphere tightened, as if the space itself was listening for an answer. Silence remained, heavy and expectant, holding the moment in place. Then the quiet was pierced by a sudden, sharp question. A blunt question challenged the value of solitude and loneliness, its words cutting through the stillness. The question lingered, hanging in the air and demanding a response. No immediate answer came, the silence pushed back again. A second question followed, asking how the person had come to be in such a state. That question probed the situation directly, seeking a simple explanation for the visible condition. Someone explained that the nurse would not stop pestering them, so they had come at the nurse's insistence. The explanation settled into the room, softening the sharpness of the prior questions. A voice faltered and stammered an address to Mother, the sound small and urgent. The air stayed charged and unresolved, the moment holding between confession and reply. The air stayed charged and unresolved, the moment holding between confession and reply. Then a desperate cry calling for Mother broke the silence. Another urgent call named Soul, this time, thrown out into the charged air. The child insisted that they had only been eating the fruit and honey the nurse gave them. Others kept insulting Mother and the child, the attacks piling up around them. The child cried out to Mother, pleading about the torment they were facing. The child begged Mother to make it so no one could ever hurt them again. A voice answered with a single, blunt question, asking why they should. The voice demanded why it should have to do that, blunt and unwilling. Someone called Talia by name and reminded her that the palace belonged to her and that all the servants in the castle were her property. The speaker pointed out that Talia was 9 years old now and scolded her for running to her mother in tears over not handling her own belongings. A brief pause followed, leaving the reprimand to hang in the air. No answer came at first, only the quiet after sharp words. The atmosphere stayed tense as the conversation continued without interruption. They reminded her plainly that she was the emperor's daughter, a title that should shape her behavior. Silence answered the reminder, giving weight to the accusation. The speaker admitted an inability to understand why Talia kept letting trivial things push her around. A moment of stillness followed, as if everyone waited for her response. It was called utterly embarrassing that the speaker's own daughter remained so naive and weak. Talia stammered out her mother's name, shaken and unsettled. No immediate reply followed, the room holding its breath for the next move. The tension lingered, giving the next decision more weight. The mother agreed to proceed and said she would leave a useful guard behind for Talia. She explained that the guard was a man she had spent a very long time taming. The mother warned that he would be quite useful if Talia handled him properly. Talia refused, insisting that she did not need someone like that. After Talia refused, a voice cried out, insisting they only wanted to stay with their mother. A quiet panel follows with no words. Another silent panel continues the moment. Silence stretches across the next image. Someone calls Talia by name. Mother declares that all of this started with her, then asks why people do not put rats in her soup. Mother points to her warm, fragrant bath and lavish dining table, asks why others would not dare to do to her what they do to Talia, and offers to reveal the secret. Mother explains that it is because people are terrified of her and would not dare try such stunts. She adds that some of them even look at her with absolute awe. Mother admits that countless others feel only disgust and contempt for her, but even those stay on guard and would never see her as an easy target to torment. A blank panel follows with no dialogue. Another empty panel shows no words. Mother declares that she is a highly dangerous existence. The sequence ends on a silent image. Following the silent image, a stark instruction appears, urging the reader to keep this in mind. The narration warns that what is strong and beautiful will attract fear and envy. It continues that things which are beautiful but weak will become easy prey, especially within the Imperial palace. The voice cautions that to avoid being ruthlessly trampled by the many who will come, one must not let others see how weak one truly is. The panel offers a brief, silent pause. The silence lingers, giving the warning time to settle. She thinks that to be weak means no one will protect her, and that being trampled is the likely outcome. Another quiet beat follows, heightening the sense of vulnerability. The single word trampled repeats across the panel, emphasizing the threat. A voice reminds her that she is the Emperor's daughter and says it cannot understand why she allows such insignificant things to push her around. Silence follows the rebuke, leaving the words to hang in the air. She admits that her mother is right, accepting that her weakness comes from acting as if she deserves special treatment, and she becomes aware of her own body language. She sits with her mother's words still settling in, aware now that her own posture and habits spoke louder than she meant them to. She wonders when she began behaving as if she deserved whatever others did to her, tracing that shift in herself. A quiet moment follows, the thought lingering as she pieces together how she let things slide. She realizes that people instinctively noticed that weakness and used it, knowing she would not fight back. She lets that realization settle, feeling the truth of it in the way others treated her. Her mood shifts as the morning routine begins to crowd her thoughts. She steels herself for what comes next, attentive to every small interaction. A soft remark notes that she is up early, drawing her into the household bustle. The nanny offers to help her wash up, but she refuses, insisting she can manage on her own. The room holds a tense, quiet as responsibilities and expectations press in around her. An attendant reminds her that, as Highness, she must keep perfect composure at all times according to Imperial law and calls the outburst childish, while the child repeats a frantic call for the nanny. The nanny answers hesitantly, uncertain how to respond to the sudden demand. She declares that from now on the nanny will be entirely responsible for helping her get ready, saying her mother already approved the change and dismissing the nanny. The nanny protests with a soft but worried question, asking if this goes against the Empress's orders. Someone nearby mutters in bafflement, wondering what has come over her. The household watches as she takes control of the moment, the decision hanging in the air. She repeats her orders, firmly washing and dressing her are now entirely the nanny's job, and the nanny must do it properly. The nanny acknowledges the command with a trembling assent. Continuing her strict orders, she snaps at the nanny and demands to be addressed as Your Highness, asking how many times she must repeat it. She insists on being called My Lady and warns that if the same mistake happens one more time, she will deliver a slap across the face. An awkward silence follows as the room absorbs her sharp warning. She waits for obedience, holding the room under her authority. No one speaks, the tension remains steady and controlled by her presence. A brief pause stretches as the household adjusts to her commands. She orders the nanny to follow her and moves on without waiting for further discussion. The nanny follows obediently, keeping close and quiet. They proceed onward under her direction, each step measured and purposeful. She commands that her food be brought to her, leaving the task to the servants. The order hangs in the air while preparations begin to obey it. A short stillness follows as servants move to fulfill her demand. She goes silent, leaving a long pause that emphasizes her authority. The quiet continues, everyone waiting for the next instruction. No words are spoken as the household holds its breath for her next move. She summons someone sharply and tells them to come sit over here, directing attention to a specific spot. Silence lingers once more as the summoned person moves to obey. Silence holds the room for a beat, the pause stretching out with no words. An apologetic voice addresses the Highness and then trails off, unable to finish the sentence. The summoned person explains that they have a lot of work to do, offering the reason for their hesitation. A quiet panel follows with no dialogue, the moment left visually open. Another silent beat passes, the scene showing no spoken response. A startled scream breaks the silence. After a brief pause, an angry voice accuses someone of ignoring orders and turning their back. The next panel offers no words, keeping the reaction momentary and tense. Silence continues in a wordless panel, the situation unresolved for the moment. A commanding voice orders that the woman be seated beside the speaker immediately. Those nearby react with visible shock at the sudden command. Someone protests, asking for a moment and trying to stop the situation from unfolding so quickly. A brief silent panel follows, holding the interruption in place. Another voice demands attention, calling for everyone to listen. The speaker frames the gesture as a token of appreciation for the daily hard work of preparing meals. The speaker announces that they will share their meal today, and the declaration draws surprised reactions from those present. The scene settles as the room processes the unexpected offer, leaving the moment poised between surprise and anticipation. The hush from the unexpected offer breaks as an attendant stammers an address to the Highness, voice trembling, and the words trailing off into silence. The Highness answers with a blunt, single-word command to eat it, a sharp order that cuts through the tension and forces the moment forward. The Highness points out that the food was brought for him to eat, pressing the matter and leaving no room for hesitation. The Highness asks if there is any reason he should not eat it. The servant stammers that they just cannot explain, trailing off in fear. The Highness snaps a single, sharp command to eat it now, forcing the moment forward. A pained grunt escapes from the servant as the forced eating begins. The servant repeatedly apologizes, begging forgiveness and promising it will never happen again. The Highness warns that if the servant does not finish every last bit in the bowl, they will not be walking out of here on their own 2 feet. The servant pleads desperately for mercy. The Highness replies that he is already being merciful, saying he could kill the servant right there, but is instead giving them a chance to live. The Highness orders the servant to shove every bit into their mouth if they understand. A commanding voice orders that the woman's hand be placed up. The same speaker warns that, since sincerity is being ignored, a finger will be cut off as an example. The panel contains no dialogue or visible text. The woman insists that she will eat it. She shouts that she will eat everything and will eat it all. A quiet panel with no text appears. The scene shows no written dialogue. A sharp ringing sound is followed by the woman's pained gagging and retching. This panel contains only blank or unreadable text. The commanding voice orders the woman to eat every single bite and demands to see the bottom of the bowl, while she groans in response. A visible website watermark appears in the panel. The panel shows no dialogue or text. There is no written text in this scene. This panel contains no visible dialogue. The scene is presented without any text. The panel shows only blank or unreadable text. There is no dialogue or text visible in this panel. The speaker orders someone to clear this away. After ordering the mess cleared, the speaker demands fresh, proper food to be brought this time. A quiet panel follows with no dialogue, giving a brief pause in the action. Everyone treated her with extreme caution. Rumors began to spread about her, calling her the second princess and accusing her of torturing an innocent maid, declaring her truly wicked. Voices warned that a viper's brood had crawled into the Imperial palace. Another panel shows no dialogue, letting the moment breathe. Silence continues across the next scene with no visible text. A visitor greets Talia and remarks that she looks especially lovely today. A brief quiet moment follows, with no words to interrupt the scene. No words appear in this panel, maintaining a visual pause. The scene remains focused on the characters without any accompanying text. The visitor suggests that Talia must be upset because it has been so long since the visitor's last visit. The visitor apologizes, explaining it took some time to prepare a special gift just for Talia. Talia responds with a hesitant question about the gift. The visitor says she has heard how effectively Talia tamed the insolent servants. The visitor tells Talia that she has made her mother very proud and therefore deserves a reward. After the visitor tells Talia she made her mother proud and deserves a reward, the atmosphere tightens as everyone waits for the promised surprise. The visitor announces the reveal with a playful, triumphant flourish. All attention shifts toward the entrance as the promised figure is revealed. A declaration introduces a handsome knight who will protect Talia from now on. A man steps forward to confirm the announcement. Silence follows briefly as the newcomer prepares to speak. He gives his full name as Varkas Ridogo Shurkin. The room listens as he continues. He explains that he has been assigned to serve at Talia's side until her coming-of-age ceremony. The announcement settles over the assembled people, marking a clear change in Talia's immediate company. A brief pause follows as everyone absorbs the news. Talia and those present adjust to the presence of the newly introduced protector. The visitor watches as the role and responsibility are formally established. The moment marks the start of a new arrangement Varkas at Talia's side until her coming of age. A quiet energy lingers in the room after the reveal, signaling the beginning of a changed dynamic. Those present begin to return to their places, the formal introduction complete. The scene closes with Varkas standing identified and tasked, and Talia left to face this new development. Talia remains alone as the next moments begin, left to face this new development. The panels hold for a beat, letting the aftermath settle. A long, heavy silence fills the space. Attention shifts to the boy, who he is described as the only small glimmer of hope in this palace. A sharp command orders someone to get out of here this instant. An angry voice answers with a crude insult. The outburst leaves the room tense and watchful. Someone calls out with a curt "hey" to draw attention. A princess snaps at the other, demanding a proper greeting and scolding the lack of respect. Her rebuke hangs in the air, awaiting a response. A stunned, wordless pause answers the princess. The moment stretches as everyone waits. No one speaks for a few held seconds. All eyes remain fixed on the same tense point. The silence continues, waiting for an answer. A subordinate finally replies with a clear "yes, princess," answering the command. With the command accepted, Varkas stands identified and tasked, and Talia is left to face what comes next. The story returns to the present day in the Roam Empire, where Varkas has accepted his command, and Talia is left to face what comes next. A short, quiet beat follows as the moment settles in the palace. Nothing is spoken here, the scene holds briefly before the conversation continues. The focus shifts slightly, preparing for the next exchange. Silence gives way to a tentative question from someone nearby. Someone asks if Talia is going to go speak to Iwi. Talia hesitates, offering only a small, uncertain reply before falling silent. A brief pause follows the hesitation, leaving the question hanging in the air. Talia remembers the first time she met Varkas. He seemed hollow then, as empty as an insect's shed skin. That memory lingers between them, quiet and undeniable. She recalls that he lost most of his emotions after undergoing harsh, brainwashing-like training by the priests to become a loyal servant of the empire. By then he had already lost joy, anger, sorrow, and pleasure, and almost all of the basic human desires. He moved only when ordered, responding to commands rather than impulses. The recollection settles into the present, coloring how Talia sees him now. Talia notes that once this mission is over, Varkas will leave the royal guard and begin the succession process to become the Grand Duke. She admits that Varkas is always polite and sometimes even shows affection, but she cannot shake the feeling that it will not feel real when he becomes her husband. She reminds herself that this marriage is arranged to strengthen a political alliance. She wonders if, by patiently pouring her affection into Varkas over a long period of time, it could ever begin to feel real. A voice asks what is the matter, and she responds with a stunned silence. She stammers that she came out to see how the travel preparations were going. A servant answers that they are almost finished, but that preparations took longer than expected, and the hotter days will make the journey arduous. An attendant explains the delay could not be helped because of Gareth. She apologizes for the trouble. Another voice reassures her that Her Highness need not apologize and that it was something that had to be done eventually. Compared to what she had braced herself for, Gareth is behaving rather decently. Given that he is sending off his precious sister, his crankiness is surprisingly mild. Silence follows for a moment. She asks if, without being a burden, she might visit the Imperial Palace regularly even after they are married. A reply assures her that as long as the long journey is not too much for Her Highness, she is free to come and go whenever she pleases. Someone questions whether the marriage was arranged in the first place to empower His Highness the Crown Prince. She thanks them for understanding. After she thanks them for understanding, a hush settles in the room and silence stretches out. The quiet lingers for a moment, the scene holding its breath before the next exchange. She asks if he can spare a moment despite his busy schedule, requesting his attention. She says she has something she wants to give before he leaves on their journey. She explains she embroidered the crest of House Shirkin and reminds him that it is tradition to give a fiancé a handmade handkerchief before a journey. She acknowledges that the journey is one they are taking together, but her words trail off. He insists that he is unworthy of such a gift. He promises that he will cherish it. A sudden shout calls for the commander, breaking the quiet. Another voice urgently calls for majesty, heightening the urgency in the room. Messengers report that he ordered them to bring that person to him immediately. They say it must be Cenobir. They claim that whatever scheme she is plotting cannot overturn it, noting she is the woman who kept the newly knighted Varkas by Talia's side for 7 years despite Grand Duke Shirkin's opposition. A brief pause follows as the declaration hangs in the air. A brief pause follows as the declaration hangs in the air. The pause stretches and silence fills the space, holding every response in place. Gradually, a small shift breaks the stillness, subtle and deliberate, pulling attention back to the present moment. Voices return in low, careful tones, each answer measured after the weight of the earlier words. Tension does not vanish, but people begin to steady themselves and take up positions to respond. Plans and reactions form quietly, shifting the moment from statement to practical motion. Decisions settle into place, and the atmosphere narrows toward a clear course of action. A path forward begins to take shape, and those present prepare themselves to move. There are no sudden gestures, only steady, practical steps that push the scene ahead. The energy shifts from uncertainty into controlled motion, each action intentional and paced. Small confirmations pass between people, quiet signs that the next phase has begun. Feet carry people away and conversations trail behind, moving the moment onward. The space empties gradually as the situation advances and attention shifts to what must be done next. Only echoes and a few lingering looks remain where the declaration first landed. A sense of finality takes hold, plain and unadorned, leaving the stage set for what comes next. A speaker dismisses her as a foolish brat not even worth hostility. The speaker adds that a Asroth is different. They point out the expectations placed on Asroth by those who find his rough temper unsettling. Someone reproves him for failing to show proper courtesy. A visitor explains that they followed Sir Shirkin here out of a desire to see their father. The visitor asks forgiveness for visiting without prior notice. The father tells them to raise their head and says they may come to see him whenever they wish. The visitor thanks him for his generous words and says they will take the opportunity to explain it to everyone. Another voice says it is for the best, since the first princess will find out anyway. He explains that the reason he called them is to inform them that there has been a change regarding the pilgrimage. A listener urges him to speak and says they are listening. He announces that Talia will be joining the pilgrimage and orders additional guards and the preparation of her travel equipment alongside theirs. The announcement draws a stunned reaction. Someone questions whether it is customary for women of the Imperial family to embark on a pilgrimage only when they are about to be married. A voice asks why he is insisting on sending her now. The voice replies with a curt well, then points out that Talia might also be getting married soon. The comment triggers an immediate, shocked reaction, a sudden exclamation of disbelief. After the outburst, words fade into a quiet pause, marked only by trailing ellipses. After the outburst, words fade into a quiet pause, marked only by trailing ellipses. Then a statement announces that Talia may soon be getting married as well. Ellipses fill the space, and someone notes that the timing of this match is quite coincidental. An observer points out that with auspicious events happening one after another in the Imperial family, it is truly a good thing. A question follows asking who the fortunate person is. Someone remarks that the audience has probably heard the name before. They identify the head of House Syrian as Count Verdine Syrian and note that the child has long since come of age, so it is about time for marriage. It seems like a suitable match. Since things have come to this, an instruction is given for her to make haste with preparations for the journey. A subordinate acknowledges the command and answers that the order is understood, responding to the instruction to hurry with preparations. A brief silence follows as the room absorbs the decision. A worried voice asks if Talia is really going to be taken like that, revealing growing concern about what will happen to her. Others quickly voice suspicion that Cenobir must be plotting and that the marriage is only a convenient pretext, and one reluctant speaker concedes that it might be so. A stunned murmur cuts in, a voice trailing off as someone asks if that is all there is to be done. An objector presses the point, even if the Empress might be planning something, how can they simply send her off like that, and what exactly is expected of them? No immediate answer comes, and tension begins to mount. A loyal official challenges the idea of disobedience by asking whether they are supposed to defy His Majesty's orders. The room holds its breath, waiting for a response that does not come. Another speaker tries to protest, starting with no and then stumbling, unable to finish the objection. One official states plainly that His Majesty is the ruler of the empire and that they have sworn loyalty to the imperial family, insisting that obedience has always been the only path. A critic replies that demanding obedience is exactly what royals have always expected from the nobility, pressing the argument from a different angle. The critic's retort presses the old expectation of obedience, and that point settles over the room, sharpening the atmosphere. The tension holds for a moment, then it breaks when someone suddenly tries to make amends. One person rushes to apologize, admitting they were anxious and that they took their frustration out on the other. They plead for forgiveness and beg the other not to turn away so coldly. The reply comes as a simple, ambiguous emoticon, a minimal reaction that keeps the tone uncertain. Another voice steps in to reassure everyone, saying there is no need for concern. They insist that no matter what scheme the Empress devises, Her Highness will never come to harm. The speaker promises protection and refuses to accept that danger will reach Her Highness. The same person recalls a vow sworn to the former Empress, saying they pledge to protect both of them as far as their power allows. The princess observes that this man easily unsettles people and then calms them again with his indifference. Her pride, dignity, and authority feel meaningless, and even after spending over a decade together, his embrace has never once grown warm. She forces herself to accept the practical logic as long as he is on their side. There is nothing to worry about, nothing at all, the reassurance trailing off. The exchange ends on that uneasy promise of protection, leaving the question of loyalty unresolved for now. The uneasy promise fades, and for a moment silence settles over the room before the conversation continues. A speaker suddenly admits that they have lost their trump card, a blunt statement that shifts the mood. The admission hangs in the air, met with a thoughtful quiet as everyone processes what that loss means. No one speaks at first, leaving a brief pause before attention moves elsewhere. The scene shifts without fanfare, the tension easing into ordinary sounds and small movements. A sleepy voice notes the heat and then mentions that Varkas is not present, wondering whether it is time to get up. Another voice answers simply by inviting the speaker to enter, opening the next moment of interaction. The invitation fills the space briefly, and footsteps follow as the encounter continues. There is a soft rustle of movement as someone approaches, bringing fresh energy to the room. A name is called out, Asroth, drawing immediate attention and shifting the focus to that person. A voice asks what brings the visitor here, and the newcomer admits having sneaked out of the castle to see her sister. The confession hangs between them, part mischief and part concern, as they measure the risk of being discovered. A narrator clarifies the family situation, stating that this child is the legitimate heir, born after the emperor and empress formalized their union. That formal detail settles over the conversation, reminding everyone of the stakes tied to lineage and position. A brief pause follows as the implications of the heir's status ripple through the room. They exchange small, careful words, each aware that titles and truth carry weight here. The scene tightens around personal concerns, moving from public facts back to private fears. One asks whether the visitor came alone and warns that if their mother finds out, there will be trouble. The visitor replies that she did not come alone and that she came with barons. Those names and warnings leave a lingering unease, as loyalty, family, and secrecy continue to shape the scene. The lingering unease carried over as the family resumed their conversation. A relative asked what had brought the sister and mentioned that they had heard she would soon be going on a long journey. The sister reacted with surprise at the idea that she was about to go on a long journey. A brief pause followed as the question hung in the air. One person said their mother had said the sister would be accompanying the pilgrimage. Someone responded with loud laughter. Another asked what else their mother had said, then fell silent. They reported that their mother had mentioned the sister might be getting married soon, and that a man named Count Syrian had sent a proposal. A short, tense quiet settled over the group. No immediate reply was recorded. Silence continued as the conversation paused. The sister asked if they had come to congratulate her and to bid a joyful farewell now that their troublesome sibling would be married off and leave the Imperial palace, reminding them that they were siblings who shared the same mother. Another pause followed as the implications of that announcement lingered. A visitor replied that if the sister married, it would become even harder to see her than it already was, and said they wanted to speak before that happened. The visitor says they came hoping to grow close like the eldest sister and brother, explaining that this was the reason for their visit. They refer to the beloved and brilliant prince born between the emperor and empress, naming the important figure at the center of the family dynamics. One person lashes out, blaming the other and saying they have been made completely worthless because of them. A quiet beat follows, the room holding the weight of that accusation. The moment stretches on as both sides absorb what was just said. Tension remains in the air as the conversation continues. Another voice rejects the idea of total devotion, asking whether they are expected to devote themselves entirely and pointing out the first princess's struggle to make her twin brother emperor. One person stammers that that was not their intention, while the other replies that their mother has probably already planned how to use her for the other's benefit. She insists her marriage was surely arranged because it would benefit him as well, and she tells the little brother to give up those pointless expectations. Silence follows that sharp exchange, the room holding a heavy pause. She declares that she has no intention of being a kind and devoted sister, beginning to explain why. She states plainly that she hates him just as much as she hates their twin siblings. She tells him that if he understands, he should disappear now, making it clear she wants him to leave. The demand hangs in the air as the visitor processes the rejection. A tense stillness settles over the scene, marking the end of that confrontation. The conversation closes on that bitter note, leaving the visitor's intentions and the family's future uncertain. After the conversation closed on that bitter note, someone suddenly cried out urgently for the princess, interrupting the room. The next panel records no dialogue, leaving the immediate reactions unspoken. Another panel follows with no words, the moment carried forward without recorded speech. Silence persists in this panel, no text is shown as the scene continues. An empty text entry appears here, offering no additional lines. She tells her mother that Asura came to see her earlier, stating the visitor's arrival plainly. A single brief pause follows the remark, the panel presenting only a quiet beat. The quiet beat continues into the next panel, leaving a brief, suspended silence. That silence holds for a moment more, giving weight to what was just said. The scene stays still, the pause stretching across another empty panel. The calm continues, the panels keeping the mood quiet and expectant. A caption indicates that Asura came to 33's the speaker, then the panel trails off with an ellipsis and silence. Another line reveals that, according to him, the speaker will be getting married soon. Someone states they had no idea Asura had taken an interest in the listener. A blank panel follows, leaving the question to hang in the air. A character lashes out, asking why they must learn of their own marriage through that child, demanding to know what the Sihil pilgrimage is, and accusing the other party of plotting a scheme. Another voice objects that calling it a scheme sounds unpleasant. One speaker points out that the listener is reaching the age to marry. A voice explains that a proposal from a suitable match arrived at the right time, so arrangements were moved along. Another voice asks if that suitable match is a man named Syrian and calls him a snake of a man. Someone asks if Mother has already thoroughly vetted him, then affirms that Syrian can properly fulfill a husband's role. In that regard, another comment notes, the man is exceptionally talented. After the remark that the man was exceptionally talented, a voice insists that if she wished, he would gladly devote himself to serving her, and the claim draws a shocked reaction from the room. One woman rejects the idea in fury, calling the man disgusting and declaring she would rather bite out her own tongue and die than let him touch her. Another responds that she will simply find a different groom. Someone says they have already been narrowing down a list of other suitable candidates, presenting alternatives to the rejected match. A brief, wordless pause follows as the discussion hangs in the air. A critic dismisses the candidate list as nothing more than a collection of Mother's deranged followers. A page marker shows the number 3, marking the scene's place in the sequence. A frustrated voice declares an absolute refusal to marry anyone and accuses the other of pretending to care, demanding to be left alone as always. Another participant starts to draw a conclusion, sensing where the refusal leads. Someone asks if she means that she wants no man except the heir to Grand Duke Sihyogen, clarifying the narrowness of her preference. A sharp rebuke follows if she wanted him that badly, she should have seized him by any means necessary, and the speaker insists they kept that man by her side for 7 whole years. Another voice bluntly asks what exactly she has been doing all this time, calling attention to the wasted opportunity. A warning follows that in just a few months the man she wanted will belong to another woman, and the speaker challenges her to say if she will simply stand by and watch. The question leaves the room momentarily silent, the tension settling on everyone present. Someone addresses Thalia directly, declaring that everything was planned solely for her sake. The speaker makes clear that everything was arranged for Thalia and offers his precious daughter a way out of her misery. He says there are 2 paths before her. The first path asks her to claim the man she desires, no matter what it takes. The other path is to accept being a loser who is at least slightly less pathetic. The speaker admits he chose the former. He boasts that by choosing that route, he obtained everything he ever wanted. He offers a concession if she lacks the ability to do the same. She can pick a moderately satisfactory alternative and pretend to be just as happy as the victor. He calls that approach somewhat pitiful, but argues preserving pride is better if defeat is inevitable. He warns that this is the last chance he is giving her. He tells her to think carefully about which path she will choose. A quiet moment follows with no dialogue. Silence continues as the decision hangs in the air. A new voice asks whether she truly intends to bring all of those belongings with her. Someone replies defensively, asking if there is a complaint about her luggage. A man is named as Edric Rubin of the Imperial Knights Order, and another voice concedes understanding of the wish to maintain the dignity expected of royalty. Edric points out that hundreds of dresses and all those accessories are unnecessary baggage, unless she plans to change outfits 5 times a day. Another observer notes that he is newly assigned and blunt. A woman replies that she might change outfits not just 5 times a day, but even 10 if needed. The banter quiets and the group shifts its focus to the coming departure. One woman refuses to ride all day in a carriage if it will soil her clothes, insisting she will not tolerate even a moment of soiled garments. Others react with disbelief at her refusal. A brief pause follows as attendants and onlookers register the complaint. Someone privately wonders if stealing the emperor's diamond necklace would have solved the problem, thinking their mother might have lent it while trying to break off Isla's engagement. She explains that their mother tried to assign attendants, but Gareth opposed some of the placements, so several attendants were turned away. She says she does not want her mother's fanatics nearby. The conversation moves on while preparations continue around them. A woman insists she absolutely cannot appear in her current state. A crowd of attendants gathers, and a quarter dwarf stands looking clueless. Tension simmers as people hurry to address the visible problems. A voice asks whether preparations for departure are still unfinished, pressing for progress. Someone notes that they will need to procure an additional carriage just for the luggage, then calls the name Barkas to handle it. The name Barkas hangs in the air as arrangements begin to be made. Attendants move through the group, preparing items and checking lists. Small tasks are assigned, and the procession schedule is reviewed. People sort belongings, deciding what must come and what can be left behind. A moment of quiet passes as the group prepares to move out. Conversations continue in low tones while attendants finish their duties. They are reminded that the procession will pass through 6 major cities, and that anything needed can be acquired along the way, so unnecessary baggage should be discarded. After the reminder about the procession through 6 major cities, the princess objects loudly that she cannot know what she might need and insists these are only clothes and accessories. Another voice points out that the northwestern regions have many cities with developed commerce and that they will have plenty of chances to shop, so the servants should not be overburdened. The princess snaps that the suggestion is ridiculous. She accuses them of trying to make her look like a disgraceful princess indulging in luxury during a pilgrimage, apparently to invite comparison with the first Princess Isla. Someone asks sharply since when the princess has cared about her reputation. A retort follows that no one places the princess and the first princess on the same level, and she should stop worrying about pompous things. No dialogue appears in this panel. No dialogue appears in this panel. A clear instruction is given to keep only what is essential and unload the rest. A panel shows unreadable markings and does not convey clear speech. Someone announces that they depart in 15 minutes and urges everyone to hurry. The princess reacts with a sharp challenge, demanding to know who the other person thinks they are. No dialogue appears in this panel. No dialogue appears in this panel. She lashes out that someone like him has no right to tell her what she can or cannot take, accusing him of already acting like he is important. The reply is biting. He is not even a Grand Duke yet, and at best only an Imperial Guard Knight, so how dare he speak to a princess of the Empire? Another voice snaps an order, asking why anyone is still standing around. Another voice snaps an order, asking why anyone is still standing around. The voice demands that the luggage be unloaded immediately. Those present answer nervously and begin to comply. Hands move to the trunks and trunks are opened as the commanded unloading gets underway without delay. The princess notes that the orders of the future Grand Duke of the East and commander of the Imperial Guard outrank hers, a reminder that her title is largely ceremonial. The realization hangs in the air, a quiet reminder of rank and command among those present. She snaps at anyone touching her belongings and orders them to keep their hands off. She warns that if even one item goes missing, she will punish those responsible severely. Workers stiffen at the threat, but continue handling the luggage under close watch. No further words are recorded as the unloading proceeds under strict orders and guarded attention. The scene settles into motion, guarded and hurried. Everyone fulfills their roles while rank and authority remain plainly enforced. The scene settles into motion, guarded and hurried. Everyone fulfills their roles while rank and authority remain plainly enforced. A sudden order cuts across the bustle, setting a sharper tone. People move on with their duties, keeping the flow of the moment steady as the tension stays focused on the pair at the center. A firm voice commands someone to sit still, asserting control and forcing the confrontation into a single, held instant. She thinks that he would never treat her this way if he truly respected her as a member of the Imperial family, the thought sharp and resentful. She compares herself to Isla, convinced that if she were Isla, he would not have tossed her aside so carelessly. A quiet, strained moment follows as the complaint hangs between them and neither side yields. The air remains taut, their disagreement unresolved as others hold their positions. Around them, the routine continues, but the exchange at the center keeps attention fixed on the personal breach. The speaker declares that the contact will be considered penance for laying hands without permission, framing the touch as an offense that must be accounted for. The speaker adds that there is no intention of indulging tantrums any longer, drawing a hard line under the matter. He reminds the other to keep in mind that he is no longer their Kingsguard, a statement that shifts the balance of authority between them. The reminder hangs in the air and changes the tone of the exchange, leaving both sides to reassess their positions. Her frustration simmers, unmet and unresolved, as the distance between them becomes more obvious. No immediate reconciliation appears, and the conversation cools into a guarded stalemate. They both hold their ground, maintaining a careful distance while the affair settles into uneasy quiet. A brief beat of silence follows, filled only by the formal rhythms of the setting around them. The scene lingers on their strained stillness, then the routine resumes and the moment is left to its consequences. After the strained stillness, they fall back into routine and leave the moment to its consequences. Days pass in measured steps. Ordinary tasks fill the hours while the unresolved pause lingers beneath the surface. Conversations remain short and practical. No one returns to the incident or forces an explanation. Faces stay composed and exchanges are clipped. The household moves through familiar motions. The routine becomes a quiet shelter. People follow patterns without addressing what happened. When they cross paths, glances are brief and careful. The tension remains unspoken. Meals, chores, and errands continue in orderly succession. The daily rhythm shows no immediate change. Small gestures take the place of conversation. Everyone keeps to their responsibilities and avoids the subject. Work and obligations occupy the hours. Time passes in tasks and routine actions. Moments of normalcy appear, but they feel tentative. The earlier stillness remains part of the atmosphere. Slowly, the memory of that moment blends into the background. Life keeps moving forward without a clear resolution. A line of text appears showing the word grave, the number 1, and the word together. The fragmented message hangs without explanation. No one offers a clear response to it. Days continue with silence threaded through them. The matter remains unsettled but is carried forward. The scene closes on their quiet endurance as life goes on around the unresolved stillness. The scene closes on their quiet endurance as life goes on around the unresolved stillness, then the perspective widens to set a broader historical stage. It was a time when the continent was divided into 10 kingdoms. Darien Roem Gerda, a royal of the Queen Kingdom, fled to the central region to escape an invasion by the Balto Kingdom. The focus stays on that exile before the narrative shifts again. A massive procession departs from the Imperial Palace as a sacred ritual, retracing the emperor's achievement of building a vast empire after 20 years of endless war. The occasion also serves to display the dignity of the imperial house by presenting the great emperor's descendants to the people. Words name the descendants of the imperial house, and the crowd erupts in a loud cry. A single shouted word from the crowd appears as the word your. Voices in the crowd call out to the prince. The procession moves on, keeping the crowd's attention fixed on the ceremonial route. The crowd swells with excitement as the ceremony continues. Scenes alternate between the procession and the faces watching it pass. A voice calls out to the princess. A garbled exclamation questions the princess's beauty, and the crowd follows with blessings offered to the princess. A garbled shout erupted from the crowd, an indistinct cry that broke the quiet. Voices in the crowd declared that they were descendants of Darien. A brief pause followed as the words settled over the gathering. Murmurs began to ripple through the audience, uneasy and curious. A drawn-out, hesitant sound trailed off, leaving a moment of tension. One voice identified her as the second princess, while another spat an insult and labeled her a bastard. They said her temper was so foul that she beat her servants nearly to death before throwing them out or killing them. A pause followed, the crowd holding its breath as rumors circulated. Someone urged that the curtains be drawn back so she could greet the citizens. The suggestion hung in the air, unanswered for a moment. Silence met the proposal, a heavy stillness spreading across the crowd. Tension built as people waited to see what would happen next. A voice insisted she had a pretty enough face, and that if she showed herself, the people would change their tune. Muted agreement spread through the audience, soft murmurs in response. Conversation continued in low tones as onlookers exchanged opinions. Whispers moved from person to person, fueling the crowd's curiosity. All eyes remained fixed on the stage and the curtains that still hid her. Someone wondered aloud that if even a man like him, a paragon of imperial loyalty, had been pushed to that point, then how terrible her behavior must have been. The thought hung in the air: if even a man renowned for imperial loyalty could be pushed to that point, then her conduct must have been far worse. The crowd absorbed the implication in silence. Those nearby traded uneasy looks, waiting to see what would follow from that realization. A quiet tension settled over the room as people waited for the next words or orders. A voice announced that preparations would begin shortly, and another voice answered with brief agreement. After the announcement, a short pause followed as everyone shifted into motion. Hands moved and murmurs resumed as people prepared for what was planned. Someone reacted with audible surprise at an unexpected sight, their astonishment breaking the steady rhythm. Another voice questioned what all the dressing up was about, sounding genuinely puzzled by the display. A hesitant speaker addressed the princess, unsure how to proceed with the matter at hand. The hesitant address hung in the air while those present awaited the princess's response. No further spoken lines appeared immediately, and the scene moved on without additional text. The moment passed with no visible dialogue, leaving actions to carry the scene forward. Quiet activity continued off-screen while the main figures remained in place. A blank panel provided a brief beat, showing no words or captions to change the mood. The sequence carried on without additional dialogue or text. No visible lines appeared in this beat, and the visuals continued to tell the story. Silence persisted for a moment as preparations and reactions unfolded off-screen. The chapter of events wound down here, with no further text to mark the transition. Even as the chapter wound down, a voice broke the quiet, complaining that they did not like it here. The next panel offered nothing in words, leaving a moment of silence between scenes. A sharp command followed "Move the campsite." Someone else responded with surprise, asking the speaker to repeat themselves. The speaker repeated their dislike of the campsite and ordered that it be moved. A guard answered that the royal guard had chosen this campsite for safety, and it could not be moved now. Another voice snapped back, asking who had requested that opinion. The original speaker doubled down, issuing a direct order to move the campsite and demanding obedience, leaving others momentarily speechless. Someone invoked Lord Shirkin's authority, stating that he held all decision-making power for the expedition. A reminder followed that no one could leave the ranks on their own, and another asked if obtaining Varkas's permission would be enough. No dialogue is shown in this panel. No dialogue is shown in this panel. When asked what was so disagreeable, the response was everything. The water's edge and the forest sat too close, the area was crawling with bugs, and there was worry about how to camp without clean water. A second voice pointed out that griffins and harpies appeared nearby, and that the forest acted as a natural defensive wall against large monsters. The complainer scoffed at safety, saying they had already been bitten by insects twice and feared vermin, nighttime noises, and the rustling of leaves would keep them from sleeping. A stunned silence followed, described as the days of seeing something incomprehensible. Someone warned that they would have to camp for several days starting that day, and urged the complainer to begin adapting now. The complainer demanded again that the campsite be moved, refusing to force themselves to endure. Others replied that everyone was exhausted from marching all day, and they could not wander around searching for a new site for that reason. Another voice dismissed the attitude as childish and ordered the person to return to the carriage and rest immediately. No dialogue is shown in this panel. The complainer snapped, asking how the other dared give them orders. She proclaimed that she was the emperor's daughter and insisted that others existed for her convenience. After proclaiming that she was the emperor's daughter and that others existed for her convenience, she declared that if she told someone to walk all night, it would be their fate to walk until dawn. The panel contains no dialogue, leaving a brief pause in the exchange. She snapped for them to shut their impertinent mouths and get lost, cutting off any further protest. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. She suspected that Mother had planted spies among them. She began to say that Mother might be trying to. No dialogue appears in this scene. She decided that the campsites needed to be separated. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. She demanded that her campsite be moved to a different location. She said her illustrious knight insisted she could not go anywhere without permission. She complained that her subordinates seemed to think the Roem knight captain outranked royalty, questioning how the Imperial Guard could show such disregard for hierarchy. No dialogue appears in this scene. 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 A brief exclamation of awe escapes from a character. A character reacts, pointing out that the word hierarchy came from the other person's mouth. Another character dismisses the remark as laughable. A sharp what follows, questioning the exchange. A member of the Imperial family insists that hierarchy exists to command those beneath and that the knights must obey them. The same speaker orders that subordinates be made to understand whose orders take priority. The speaker warns of flogging as punishment for disrespect. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. The speaker asks whether everything they say simply goes in one ear and out the other, as if the listener does not take it in to feel satisfied. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. No dialogue appears in this scene. The speaker says they can only imagine how much the listener has been plotting all this time. The speaker says they can only imagine how much the listener has been plotting all this time. Then the speaker taunts that the listener must be relieved not to have to follow that insufferable girl's orders anymore, and accuses them of not even pretending to listen. The listener replies that only if the words were worth listening to would they at least pretend to pay attention. One voice complains about being treated like filth and admits they were mistaken. They declare that if things are going to be this miserable, perhaps it would be better if this man disappeared from the world. The speaker snaps back, asking whether that even sounds like words to the listener. The speaker threatens to speak in the language of beasts, invoking the manner of the listener's barbarian ancestors. One person offers to make hoarse noises if it would help, and another retorts that such sounds would suit the listener better because they prefer horses to humans. Someone says it is better to talk to a horse than to deal with the listener, adding that their stallion understands them better than the listener does. They point out that the stallion does not whine constantly and make people sick, then accuse the listener of flaring up even at this level of counterattack while ruthlessly digging into others' weak points. The speaker asks whether the listener acts so cocky because they think no one else can be as vile as they are. A character repeats their earlier demand to have the campsite moved somewhere else and orders that the knights be told to carry out the move immediately. One person snaps that they did not come here to engage in this kind of useless bickering. Voices clash. One refuses to dance to another's whims and insists they have no obligation to explain decisions, while another tells them to stop fussing and go rest. Someone argues that moving the camp is not the same as moving the entire camp and asks why the task cannot be done, and another invokes their status as the emperor's daughter to demand obedience. A brief, tense silence follows the heated exchange, giving way to a new interruption. A sharp command cuts through the room, ordering everyone to stop. The speaker announces that all patience for the day has been exhausted. They insist the others should know when to call it a day and stop pushing the matter. The rebuke settles over the group, making the atmosphere stiff and watchful. A firm order follows: escort Her Highness the Princess to her quarters. Everyone begins to move, preparing to carry out the command to lead the princess away. Someone mutters that they still wish he were dead, a bitter remark that hangs in the air. The bitter remark still hangs in the air. For a moment, everything quiets and the scene begins to move on. No words follow immediately. The moment passes without further comment. They pass through Sordica, a small city in the northwest, and then continue heading north. The travel continues, steady and unremarked. Silence holds as the journey goes on. A quiet stretch of time bridges the scenes and carries them forward. Nothing interrupts the steady pace for now. The characters keep moving, focused on what lies ahead. Someone vows that if not today, then tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, then the day after. That determination lingers as they press onward. The movement continues without further explanation. No immediate response follows the earlier promise. An enraged outburst commands that all of them should die, the words striking the quiet. The harsh shout reverberates briefly before the scene settles again. Silence returns, heavy and watchful. Attention narrows to the pressing question at hand. Tension tightens as the focus sharpens on a single concern. Someone exclaims that Varkas is still breathing fine, the declaration cutting through the quiet. The declaration that Varkas is still breathing cuts through the quiet. A tense pause follows as everyone absorbs the news. Silence hangs in the air, heavy and watchful, while no one moves to break the moment. Minutes stretch as attention stays fixed on Varkas, waiting for any change. Small sounds, a soft shuffle, a held breath mark the fragile quiet around them. Tension remains simple and plain as the group hesitates over what to do next. Time seems to slow, each moment feeling more important than the last. No clear answers appear, only the steady, watchful waiting around Varkas. The atmosphere stays strained, every expression guarded and quiet. Questions linger in the air, unspoken and unresolved. The group holds its position, each person waiting for a sign that the situation will change. A growing unease threads through the scene, small but unmistakable. At last, a voice breaks the hush, tentative and searching for direction. The reply only deepens the uncertain mood, drawing more attention inward. Someone says that the feeling grows like a tumor, a grim observation that tightens the room. The remark lingers, and the weight of it settles over everyone present. Another voice urges that they should just go back, a suggestion born of fear and doubt. Someone reminds another that they were in a place like this before, invoking memory to explain the present unease. The reminder hangs between them, calling up that earlier memory and explaining why the place feels wrong. A quiet follows as they let that memory settle over the present moment. They take in the surroundings again, watching how the scene echoes the past. No immediate explanation appears, only a steady, lingering unease. Their movements slow as they move through the space with more caution than before. Stillness presses in around them, sharpening every small detail. They search the room with their eyes, looking for the source of the familiar feeling. The atmosphere remains heavy, the memory and the present overlapping. Silence stretches as they stand side by side, waiting for something to change. Then one of them notices a detail that shifts the moment. That small observation cuts through the quiet and brings attention back to the body of the room. The remark lands plainly between them and changes how they feel in the space. They become aware of a shift in the air around them, a physical detail that matches the memory. The air is cold, a clear fact that anchors the unease to the present moment. The chill confirms what the memory suggested, tying past and present together. They stand with that cold between them, each registering the same sensation. The unease remains as they wait to see what will happen next in this familiar, chilled place. The unease remains as they wait to see what will happen next in this familiar, chilled place. Moments pass in tense silence, every second feeling a little heavier. The quiet is broken by a stark caption that demands attention. Eyes turn to the words as the message becomes clear. The page holds still while the choice settles over everyone present. That blunt choice hangs in the air, forcing a moment of reflection. A caption lays out two paths. One path demands obtaining the man one wants by any means necessary. The other path presents a bleaker alternative, becoming a slightly less miserable loser. The blunt options leave a hollow pause, and everyone waits for what comes next. Silence follows the declaration as tension threads through the scene. No one speaks at first, the atmosphere still and watchful. Then a sudden shout cuts through the quiet, drawing attention away from the caption. A voice calls urgently for the Imperial princess, breaking the stillness. Another voice scolds the Imperial princess for leaving without informing anyone and reminds her she should not wander alone without an escort. The reprimand hangs in the air as people gather around. Concern ripples through the group as they take in her condition. An attendant comments on the state she is in and asks whether she might have suffered some kind of mishap. A guard addresses her as Your Highness and states a duty to protect her, the sentence trailing off as he prepares to take action. She notes that if anyone saw them now, they would assume he was genuinely worried about her. Someone points out that orders were to never take their eyes off the reckless Imperial princess for even a moment. A man snaps back, asking why he is blamed for losing sight when the other was spacing out. A brief pause falls over the group as the argument dies down. Someone yells that their hand is caught and curses loudly, furious that a door was closed while the hand was inside, then orders to ignore the commotion. The princess scoffs and lets the others babble, reminding herself that tuning out other voices is the first lesson learned in the palace. The group moves forward, leaving the petty arguments behind. A monk acknowledges that the visitors suffered much on their long journey. One of the visitors asks if the man before them is the abbot, and another wonders whether he is a demi-human. The man answers that he is Vasilis, responsible for managing the monastery, and addresses the noble imperial crown prince with respect. Vasilis offers a sincere welcome to Mordawin. Vasilis explains that this land is where his ancestor, the great Emperor Darian, achieved his first victory against the North, and where the emperor received the revelation of his mission to unify the nations. He says he is truly pleased to have come here. The visitor requests a blessing in the names of the saints according to imperial tradition and asks that God's grace rest upon the future of his sister and himself. Vasilis replies that he will gladly accept that request. Vasilis offers that, for now, they should go to his private residence to relieve their travel fatigue. Attendants announce that a grand banquet has been prepared starting a few days ago to serve the Highness. A brief, quiet moment passes with no further words. Silence lingers between them, marked only by drawn-out pauses. They are told to allow the Highness to decide as he pleases. The Highness then chooses to stay at the abbot's private residence for the night. A clear instruction follows to take good care of Isla, since this is her first time traveling this far and everything will feel unfamiliar and uncomfortable. No response is recorded in the next moment. One person grumbles that it would be nice if he showed the speaker's sister as much devotion as he shows his horse. The conversation falls into a quiet beat, leaving a short pause in their exchange. Another empty moment follows, with nothing else spoken. Someone wonders whether she is simply being cautious now or has finally grasped her own place. Another voice admits they would have twisted her neck if she had caused trouble, yet notes that she did not appear at all during the entire journey. The remark about twisting her neck hung in the air for a moment, then the group shifted their focus to other matters. A brief silence followed as guests adjusted to the change in tone. Someone pointed out that business in the Holy Land was bringing in quite a fortune, noting the prosperity it generated. An attendant announced that a meal had been prepared in the hall directly downstairs. There was a small pause as people considered the arrangements for the meal. No one spoke for a moment while the evening continued to unfold. The atmosphere remained calm as preparations and conversations continued. She admitted to herself that no matter how she looked at him, she just could not grow attached to him. She acknowledged that he had never once gone against her, yet she wondered if she could truly entrust half of herself to someone who always kept her so guarded. Someone asked where Isla was. An attendant explained that Isla was resting in the dormitory used by the priestesses and would not be attending the banquet. They added that after days of camping out, she would naturally be exhausted and that recovery medicine had already been prepared for her, so there was no need to worry. Another voice reminded the crown prince that Isla was his fiancée and asked if he should be showing her a little more care. The crown prince replied that he was always considerate toward her highness. An attendant clarified that her imperial highness was resting comfortably and that there was no cause for concern, asking that no offense be taken. A few quiet moments passed as the conversation settled back into the evening's rhythm. A host thanked the crown prince for attending and invited him to take a seat. The crown prince expressed gratitude for the warm welcome, and the hosts directed him to sit down. After the crown prince accepted the warm welcome and took his seat, a brief quiet settled over the room. Guests shifted their attention, watching the room for what would come next. A short silence held, then murmurs spread, noting that the knight's commander possessed an extraordinary appearance. A speaker called on everyone to show gratitude to the abbess for arranging the delightful gathering. They wished for the occasion to become a meaningful one for all in attendance. The toast passed and the hall slowly returned to low conversation. People resumed casual chatter and the event continued on its course. The atmosphere remained pleasant, with guests exchanging polite remarks. That easy mood held for a while as the evening moved forward. Small movements and whispers drifted through the room without incident. Guests continued to mingle, unaware that a sudden interruption was about to occur. A rising tension began to gather at one side of the hall. An outraged guest demanded how someone dared appear dressed like that and reminded them they had been warned to stay out of sight. The newcomer stammered that they had heard the warning, but could not stay away because their dear brother had clearly longed to see them. They explained that they could not refuse the crown prince's request and had even taken the trouble to dress up for the occasion. Another voice scoffed and dismissed the explanation as absurd nonsense. Tension hung in the air as everyone turned to watch the confrontation unfold. Tension hung in the air as everyone turned to watch the confrontation unfold. A sharp voice reminded the room that the brother was well aware of his sister's temperament and even dispatched the Imperial Knights commander to deliver the message, implying he had been eager to see her. The Crown Prince's earnest request was presented as reason enough to meet expectations, and that plea became the justification for the visit. The sister greeted her brother warmly, saying it was pleasant to see him again and asking if he was happy. He admitted he had been until her arrival, and she insisted that coming all this way despite her exhaustion had been worth it. The brother grew impatient, asking how much longer she would keep acting out and whether she was testing how much of her he was willing to tolerate. The sister called those words hurtful and explained that she had simply accepted the invitation. She said she did not understand why he was so furious when she had done nothing wrong, appealing to him as his adorable youngest sister. A brief moment passed without further words, the exchange lingering between them. Another voice questioned whether the brother was being too harsh in his treatment of her. A startled, clipped sound escaped from someone nearby, an indistinct interruption to the rising heat of the argument. A courtier made a crude remark, suggesting the sister appeared to be in heat and mocking her situation. The tone turned colder as another voice told her to take an attendant if she needed company, then warned that any scandal that tarnished the Imperial family's name would be punished so she could never show her face again. Amid the threats and jabs, she asked what exactly he planned to do next. Silence settled for a beat as the question hung unanswered, everyone waiting for the next move. She admitted that when he spoke like that, it made her desperate to live up to his expectations, revealing how much his words affected her. The crowd watched on, the confrontation holding their full attention as the siblings faced each other. The moment stretched, every eye fixed on the pair and the uncertain outcome that loomed just ahead. After that stretched moment, a voice called out to the Highness, snapping the assembly back to attention. The hall held its focus on the figures at the center, waiting for whatever would come next. Eyes stayed fixed forward as the pause lengthened and people braced for a reply. Someone reminded everyone that they were waiting to hear the Highness's congratulatory speech, bringing the purpose of the gathering back into focus. A soft rustle moved through the crowd as attention tightened around the impending words. Preparations seemed to shift toward the expected address, signaling that the moment to speak was near. A voice admitted that they had thought they were being threatened, an unexpected confession that changed the tone. Faces reacted subtly to the admission, the mood shifting from anticipation to quiet concern. Silence followed as listeners absorbed what had been said and waited for clarification. The speaker declared that they had wasted enough time on pointless squabbling, signaling a desire to move past the conflict. With that, the speaker urged everyone to begin eating, shifting the event from tension to communal action. The speaker asked the assembly to once again thank the abbess for arranging the gathering, acknowledging her role in bringing them together. A wish was offered that the day become a meaningful occasion for everyone present, steering the tone toward harmony. The formal tension eased as conversation began to resume around the room. Guests started to relax, the gathering returning to its social rhythm. Soft laughter and low voices filled the hall as people engaged with one another once more. A final admonition reminded the Imperial Highness to show at least the bare minimum of manners as a guest, a public nudge toward proper conduct. A final admonition reminded the Imperial Highness to show at least the bare minimum of manners as a guest, a public nudge toward proper conduct. An onlooker thought she was probably about to start throwing things around again. A hostile voice dismissed the matter as too insignificant to bother with, then vowed that on the day of ascension, the speaker would erase her from the world forever. Someone admitted that they had made a mistake. Someone said that it was bothering them. A voice asked whether the food did not suit her tastes. A voice asked whether the food did not suit her tastes. The panel shows no dialogue. She judged the meal to be rather humble compared to those served in the Imperial Palace. The panel shows no dialogue. She thought that if she ate something, he might stop talking to her. The panel shows no dialogue. 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 A speaker complained that the banquet had been disappointing and said they would head back to try to get some sleep. The panel shows no dialogue. Someone observed that she was at it again. The panel shows no dialogue. 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 One person questioned the point of putting herself on display only to stir up trouble, accused the listener of drawing the crown prince's intolerance, and added that at times the prince seemed to find the listener even more unbearable than the speaker. A voice implored the highness to calm down, followed by an urgent shout demanding that someone let go. The panel shows no dialogue. A hesitant sound began with then continued with ma, indicating interrupted speech. A bystander exclaimed surprise, noted a young girl, and then fell silent. Silence followed the bystander's outburst, and all attention stayed on the young girl. The moment stretched without anyone breaking it. Eyes lingered on the scene as people waited for what would happen next. A hush stayed in the air, holding the room in a quiet pause. Time seemed to slow as the crowd absorbed the unexpected sight of the girl. From the day of the former empress's memorial service, tensions began to shift. Certain people began to provoke Gareth at every opportunity. Those provocations did not go unnoticed by others present. Whispers spread through the crowd as the situation grew more uncomfortable. The atmosphere turned colder as alliances became clearer. The speaker's reputation, already at rock bottom, plummeted even further. That fall in standing was visible to everyone who watched. The crown prince's reputation took a hit as well. This damage was tolerated because it made the mother happy. People exchanged looks, sensing that the situation served someone's interests. A quiet tension settled between those involved. A soft exclamation broke the silence for a moment. The speaker admitted that the princess would never love them and said they would drag Gareth's honor through the mud if necessary. That declaration hung heavy, revealing the speaker's desperation. Silence returned as people absorbed the harsh words. To the princess, everything was merely a tool or a means. The speaker feared they would truly become nothing to the princess. That fear explained the lengths the speaker was willing to go to. Eyes shifted as people considered the consequences of those actions. A voice demanded to know the speaker's business, breaking the tension and forcing a response. The demand for the speaker's business met resistance. Another voice cut in, angrily telling the person to get lost. The speaker stammered that it was because of something said earlier. The other person pressed, asking what exactly had been said. The speaker could not finish the sentence, unable to find the words. The scene shifted back to the banquet hall, returning to the moment that started the argument. The banquet hall scene continued with no spoken words shown, leaving the tension visible but unvoiced. One person insisted they had no idea what the other was talking about, denying any knowledge. Another figure announced they were leaving. Someone else accused them, reminding them that they had said they wanted to live up to the crown prince's expectations. The accused repeated that that was what they had said, trying to defend themselves. A harsh suggestion followed: if a bed partner was needed, they could choose from their attendants. The speaker added that, because their brother had said those things, they were eager to meet those expectations. Someone wondered if that might be the reason and then addressed the highness, asking for permission. The speaker trailed off with a single syllable, followed by an indecipherable string of zeros and capital O's as written in the text. The speaker reported that their body would not move, stuck and unable to act. Anger flared as the speaker accused someone of daring to lay a hand on them. The speaker decided they had to scream at him to get lost immediately, feeling desperate to push him away. A brief moment followed with no dialogue, the scene holding its breath. Another quiet beat passed, with no words shown as the situation continued to unfold. The scene ended with an abrupt, shocked reaction, marked by exclamation in the panel. The sudden shock turns into a sharp cry of pain as someone screams out, the sound cutting through the room. A brief, wordless pause fills the panel, leaving a tense silence in the aftermath of the cry. A voice calls the name Varkas, sharp and urgent, bringing attention back to the scene. The next panel holds stillness, the visuals offering no words as the moment lingers. Another quiet beat passes, the scene allowing the tension to settle for a heartbeat. Silence continues across the panels, a visual pause before the exchange resumes. The panels remain empty of dialogue, holding a restrained, watchful stillness. A flustered voice stammers, insisting that they were only something, the sentence trailing off in panic. A person stammers an appeal to His Highness, then is sharply ordered to be quiet, followed by the sound of choking. A calm but firm voice warns that neither side wants the matter to grow and instructs the person to return to their seat quietly. The speaker says it would be best if the person stayed out of sight until they leave, and the other, flustered, promises to keep that in mind. The scene pauses again, the panels offering no words as the characters regroup. A quiet, vacant panel holds the breath of the moment, giving space before the next movement. The visuals remain wordless, a short interlude of silence after the confrontation. Stillness continues in the panels, the story pausing as characters settle back into place. The sequence closes on a quiet note, the tension easing as the group prepares to move on. The quiet is broken by a firm voice directing everyone to follow. Someone then offers to escort them back to their quarters, stepping forward with an official tone. A brief pause settles as the offer hangs in the air. No immediate answer follows, leaving a stillness in the moment. The scene shifts quietly, the group waiting for what comes next. One character questions why he is acting so indifferent, the thought lingering among them. A moment of uncertainty follows the question. A short beat passes as everyone processes the exchange. The tension stretches for a heartbeat before it snaps. A garbled, urgent shout erupts, the text appearing scrambled but clearly demanding that the follower stop. The outburst draws immediate attention, shifting the atmosphere. Silence falls for a beat as everyone reacts to the sudden voice. The scene tightens, the group on edge after the interruption. A small, unclear syllable appears in the text, barely audible amid the commotion. A voice stammers in surprise, the reaction sharp and immediate. A caption signals a sudden turn, announcing that events are about to escalate. A warning appears, stating that playing with fire will lead to getting burned eventually, the sentence trailing off as the thought breaks. Silence stretches after the warning, reduced to a trailing string of ellipses. The quiet holds for a beat, with no words or images to fill it. An unseen voice asks if it is not about time to learn to be more cautious. A shocked exclamation erupts in response, sharp and disbelieving. The voice presses the point further, questioning whether they truly intend to be so reckless with themselves. The voice presses the point further, asking whether they truly intend to act so recklessly. Silence answers at first, the question hanging in the air. The quiet stretches as those present take a moment to absorb what was asked. The voice requests that they restrain themselves for the time being, explaining a desire to avoid any troublesome complications until this journey is over. The request hangs between them, neither dismissed nor accepted outright. A brief pause follows while the others process the warning. Caution settles over the group, quiet and steady. The voice concedes with a curt "well then," moving to close the topic for now. The voice expresses that it trusts everyone understands each other, signaling an end to the discussion. No further objections surface after that. They prepare to continue onward, keeping the warning in mind. The mood remains cautious but focused on the path ahead. Conversation grows quiet as the group resumes the journey. There are no more heated exchanges, only steady movement forward. All attention shifts to reaching their destination without inviting complications. For now, the warning holds and they press on with care. They continue onward with caution, the earlier warning still guiding their steps. They move carefully, senses tuned for anything out of place. Their pace stays measured, each person maintaining quiet vigilance. The group advances without haste, keeping distance and awareness. Their eyes sweep the surroundings, searching for anything unusual. No sign of immediate danger appears, but they do not relax. Suddenly, a sharp exclamation cuts the quiet, startling everyone nearby. All attention turns to the source of the sound, and alertness rises. A tense stillness follows as they quickly assess what happened. They scan the area with careful steps, checking every corner and shadow. No obvious threat reveals itself, yet their caution stays intact. The next day arrives, shifting them into a new morning and a new start. Morning light makes the surroundings clearer, changing their perspective a little. They take the moment to regroup and consider their plan for what comes next. For now, the warning still holds, and they continue forward with careful steps into the day. The warning still holds, so they move into the day with care. The ceremony is underway, carried out as if nothing had happened. One attendee says they are not feeling well and will sit this one out, choosing to skip the event. A brief quiet follows the announcement, and the scene shifts without any spoken words. They question whether they should have simply gone instead. The moment holds for a beat, showing emotion without explanation. Silence fills the panel, letting the unspoken worry linger. No words are offered here, only a steady continuation of the scene. The story pauses on a quiet beat, keeping the focus on small, tense movements. They admit they no longer know which of the two people they resent more. The scene offers no dialogue, only the continued progression of events. Another quiet panel keeps the mood restrained and focused on the characters' faces. They think he must be absolutely sick of them by now, a painful thought that sits heavy in their chest. No words appear here, only the aftermath of that self-reproach. A voice warns that after playing with fire and being badly burned once, it is time to start being careful. The panel shows a quiet reaction, with no further dialogue to follow the warning. Someone calls Barkas and demands his attention, directing him to look. A final line of dialogue appears, but its wording is unclear in the panel, leaving the exact suggestion indistinct. She asks whether the outfit makes her look more mature, pressing for reassurance after the previous unclear suggestion. A moment passes with no dialogue, leaving the question unanswered for now. The panel remains silent, offering no response to her question. She repeats the question more forcefully, demanding to know how she looks and pushing for an immediate answer. Silence fills the panel again, creating a brief, tense pause. A blunt reply tells her she looks like a child playing dress-up in an adult's closet, and that the outfit does not suit her at all. The scene shifts without dialogue, leaving the reaction to that harsh assessment unspoken. Another quiet panel follows, extending the uneasy pause between them. She stammers, asking if this particular outfit is a bit too revealing, sounding uncertain. A short pause appears on the page, with no words to answer her concern. The panel offers no spoken lines, leaving the moment visually focused. She declares that soon enough, she will be the most beautiful woman in the world, stating her ambition plainly. She proposes another option, but the wording comes out garbled and unclear in the panel. There is no readable text in this panel, leaving the suggestion unanswered on the page. She explains that the outfit is for her coming-of-age ceremony and insists it needs to be at least this extravagant. After insisting the outfit must be extravagant for her coming-of-age ceremony, she remains among the gowns while others react. One companion points out the very first dress and insists she should choose that one. They pause to consider the suggestion, comparing the first dress to the rest. The atmosphere stays focused on the gowns as the choice narrows. A small exclamation breaks the quiet, drawing attention back to the selection. Another voice points out that she had been acting like she did not care earlier. She listens as the mood shifts and the conversation tightens around the choice. Someone teases that she must have been paying close attention after all. A companion points and asks if this is the dress they mean. They move closer to the chosen gown to get a better look. Hands and eyes trace the fabric as everyone studies the details. The dress is held up and examined from different angles to judge its effect. A quiet moment follows as they imagine how the gown might move. Thoughts of the upcoming dance and ceremony linger around the choice. The conversation settles on whether the dress will make the right impression. She says that if she dances in this dress, she will look just like a fairy queen. She urges the other not to stand there like a statue and invites them to come practice with her. The invitation to practice hangs in the air as they prepare around the chosen gown. The invitation to practice still hangs in the air as preparations continue around the chosen gown. They work with quiet purpose, keeping focus on the task at hand. Small adjustments take priority. Fabric is smoothed, placements are checked, and the space is arranged to suit the upcoming rehearsal. When the last detail is settled, everyone steps back to observe and wait, holding the quiet moment just before practice begins. After the last detail is settled, a sharp voice cuts through the quiet and urges everyone to hurry, pushing the group toward the next moment. Another speaker insists that those present should regard the opportunity as an honor, adding weight to the instructions already given. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, leaving a short, empty beat between commands. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, maintaining the quiet pause before action. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, the scene holding still as preparation continues. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, a brief moment of calm between instructions. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, leaving the focus on the setting rather than words. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, the scene shifting silently toward what comes next. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, preserving the quiet that settled over the group. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, the moment held between instruction and action. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, leaving the visuals to speak without words. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, and the scene waits on the brink of practice. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, the space remains quiet and unreadable. A short, indecipherable scrawl appears on the panel, its meaning unclear and unreadable. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, holding the scene steady before events begin. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, and the group remains poised at the threshold of practice. The panel remains quiet with no visible dialogue, the group still poised at the threshold of practice. Silence continues in the next panel, no text or speech appears to break the moment. The scene stays wordless, holding the pause before anything happens. No dialogue appears here either, keeping the atmosphere still and watchful. Another quiet panel with no visible text or speech, the group unchanged. The silence holds for a moment longer, no characters speak in this panel. A concerned voice asks if someone is all right, and the injured person answers with a strained groan. The panel returns to silence, with no additional dialogue or visible text. A sharp reprimand follows, blaming someone for not cleaning the room immediately. Nearby, a label identifies the position as Escort Knight. An angry voice threatens the Escort Knight, warning about a bruise and calling the knight useless. The Escort Knight cries out in pain, responding to the sudden accusation or contact. No visible dialogue appears in this panel, and the action pauses briefly. One character accuses another of pulling their hair, while the other explains that the hair became caught on a button. The final panel shows no dialogue, leaving the small conflict unresolved for the moment. A sudden cry of pain cuts through the quiet, a short, sharp outburst that breaks the silence. The injured voice snaps back, complaining about the pain and lashing out at the other person with an insult. A panel with no text follows, leaving the immediate reaction unspoken and the moment open. A long row of dots marks a pause, creating a tense, wordless beat between the characters. A startled exclamation is followed by a demand to know what is happening, then a frustrated command telling anyone with a problem to use words. Another panel shows no dialogue, letting the scene breathe for an instant. Silence continues, with no text to explain the characters' next moves. The next panel remains wordless, maintaining the unresolved tension. Another quiet panel follows, keeping focus on the visuals rather than speech. The sequence holds its silence again, with no lines to resolve the exchange. No words appear in the next panel, preserving the pause between them. A further silent beat passes, the lack of dialogue stretching the moment. Still no text appears, leaving the characters' reactions to the art alone. A single clipped address is uttered, directing attention toward one character. A voice points out that he seems a little too close, calling attention to the other's proximity. The final panel returns to silence, leaving the small conflict unresolved for now. Silence gives way to the scent of mint, a sharp note that fills the quiet space. A fractured syllable trails off, then a speaker issues a clear warning that breaking even a single strand of their hair will mean death. Only an ellipsis remains on the page, a long pause between words. The next panel shows no text, leaving the moment wordless. Stillness continues across the page, with no dialogue to break it. Another quiet panel follows, the scene held without words. Silence persists in the next frame, the visual moment uninterrupted. No dialogue appears here either, the action left to the images alone. A stammering question cuts through the quiet, asking if they are done yet. The following panel falls silent again, the question hanging unanswered. Still no words appear, the scene held in quiet anticipation. Another voice snaps that it is enough and urges to just cut it. Silence falls once more, the exchange left unresolved between the speakers. Long ellipses stretch across the panel, drawing out the quiet. The final panel returns to silence, leaving the small conflict unresolved for now. The silence from the previous panel continues, leaving the small conflict unresolved for now. A quiet beat follows, giving the characters a moment to hesitate without words. Blank space fills the panels, extending the pause and holding the tension in place. The scene stays still, the moment hanging without any clear resolution. One character stammers an objection, unable to finish the thought neatly. The same speaker pleads not to have too much of their hair cut, anxious about the result. A short pause follows the plea, leaving the request hanging in the air. An empty panel gives a silent beat before anything else happens. Silence continues to occupy the space, with no immediate response. The quiet holds steady, as if both sides are waiting for someone to move first. No words break the stillness, and the moment stretches on. Another voice cuts through the hush, asking how long the other plans to keep sitting there. Someone admits that the situation feels awkward, acknowledging the tension. One character offers an item to the other, then quickly dismisses it, saying they do not need it and the other can throw it away. Silence settles again, and the small disagreement remains unresolved for now. Silence continues to hang in the air, a quiet pause that follows the earlier disagreement. Stillness fills the space as no one speaks for a moment. The quiet stretches on, each person holding their place without moving the conversation forward. An unnamed voice asks whether someone should be excused, and another voice replies with a hesitant affirmation. A brief pause follows their exchange, the question left to hang in the air. No response comes immediately, and the moment lengthens. The room remains subdued as everyone waits for someone to break the silence. That silence keeps holding, neither side making a move to resolve the small tension. Words stay unspoken for the time being, and the situation remains unresolved. One voice offers maybe, but another voice immediately rejects the idea and insists that it is impossible. The blunt refusal lingers between them, sharpening the quiet that follows. A voice presses again with but just maybe, attempting once more to reopen the possibility. Silence settles again, and the small disagreement remains unresolved for now.
A dignified young woman in an ornate dress stepped forward as shock echoed in her voice. Still, a woman with a hood turned sharply, startled by the mention of Isla and Varkas near the massive ornate door. Still, a blonde woman with blue eyes shouted that she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Still, a white-sleeved figure gripped the black twisted door handle with a deliberate, cautious motion. Someone demanded to know if he truly loved her. A blonde girl with intricate hair accessories gazes forward, her expression calm and thoughtful. Someone accused another of marrying for political motives. A supportive and gentle man quietly told the vulnerable woman he hoped this was all there was to worry about. A girl with long braided hair stands quietly behind a translucent curtain, her presence almost blending into the soft light. A tearful young woman in a hooded cloak leaned into a tall man as he gently held her arm, offering silent support. A guarded and defiant figure made it clear they saw no reason their answer should matter. The solemn young man with light hair quietly asked if political reasons would make any difference. Still, a young girl with wide blue eyes stared ahead, worry etched across her face. A dark-haired woman clenched her fists near her chest, stating that she had promised to marry the first princess and would keep that vow. A firm woman faced the man and told him she had never intended to return his feelings. Someone quietly wished they wouldn't have to deal with any more uncomfortable encounters. A silver-haired young man stands in silence, lost in thought beneath the gentle glow. Someone insisted the engagement should stay free of scandals, while another person couldn't hold back tears. A graceful young woman reaches out and her hand gently closes around the ornate door handle. A woman in a floral dress steps softly onto the wooden floor. A blonde woman in a green dress drops down quickly, then covers her mouth in shock. The young woman kneels on the floor as a man with steady steps walks away, and she wishes she had moved just a little faster. A smoky darkness blurs into white as the narrator wonders aloud if they would have been the one crying in that moment. An anxious and tense figure covers their mouth, their wide blue eye reflecting a surge of fear. A young man with light brown hair lowers his gaze, wondering why he never saw that look when he pleaded for love. A young woman with braided hair wonders aloud if being seen as a nuisance could have meant her death right then. A dark-haired man taps his wrist, feeling genuine fear of Varkas settle deep inside. A pale-haired young man clutches his arm, feeling sure that just a few words from this man could completely destroy him. A woman in a red dress stands serenely in the corridor while a gray-haired man quietly lingers behind her. A gloved hand reaches out and gently touches long blonde hair, as a warning of danger echoes in the background. The blonde woman in the red dress warns the gray-haired man not to come any closer. The blonde girl's wide blue eyes fill with shock as she suddenly realizes something is terribly wrong. The silver-haired young man fixes his serious gaze on the blonde woman, his attention unwavering as tension lingers between them. The woman in the long dress walks away down the stone path, leaving the man with gray hair standing silently outside the castle. A chandelier casts a golden glow as the narrator admits they must master their emotions or be consumed by pain. Still, the narrator fought harder against the turmoil building inside. A composed young woman with long blonde hair explained that she wore dresses Varkas disliked, challenging his opinions on purpose. One reflective man with a hand on his chest told the others that the woman reminded him of Senevere in her youth. The narrator quietly observed that the woman looked just like Senevere, especially among so many of his mother's admirers gathered in the hall. A regal blonde man in medieval armor stood solemnly before two silent figures, framed by ornate windows and lush greenery. A regal blonde woman sat confidently at the head of a lavish table, the 5 men around her watching in tense, formal silence. The narrator quietly admitted there might have been a wish to impress others. Then, the narrator pointed out that countless people longed for the speaker, highlighting all that had gone unnoticed. A confident blonde woman raised her goblet with quiet resolve as a young man in armor watched her from the shadows. A solemn young woman with ornate hair accessories gazed downward, lost in her own thoughts. A serious-looking young man with silver hair stood in silence, his uniform marked by a crest and shoulder armor gleaming under the light. Still, the jewelry-adorned woman stayed motionless, her thoughts turning inward as she lingered in quiet contemplation. Someone demanded to know why the silent companion never seemed to care, wondering if after 7 years, concern or even a little resistance was possible. 3 men supported a drunk blonde woman in an elegant dress, while the man in a purple cloak gently offered to help her stand. A blonde woman with a crown-like headpiece looked down, blushing and dazed as several hands touched her shoulder, arm and wrist. A blonde woman's frustration showed as she admitted she felt everyone treated her like she might break. A blonde man kissed the unseen princess's hand and told her she was beautiful, but insisted everyone's attention was really on him. Radiant golden light streamed down as a regal woman lounged on her throne, 5 men kneeling and bowing in reverence before her. Someone reflected that with so much already in their grasp, failing to win over Varkas hardly seemed to matter at all. One player announced another victory, while their opponent replied with a sarcastic acceptance. A young girl with intricate braided hair held out a card, demanding to know if it was finally time her name was remembered. A brown-haired man laughed and teased a blonde woman, saying she should start using the name Alice since she looked like an Alice. At a long table, a disinterested princess faced 3 playful men who teased her about forgetting their names, while a silver-haired man watched in silence. A concerned attendant steadied an intoxicated noblewoman at the card table, quietly reminding her that she was completely drunk once again. A smug man leaned in closer, while a young woman with an apprehensive look glanced sideways, her suspicion barely hidden. Someone called out the word magus, as flower shapes drifted through the glowing light. A surprised blonde woman in a pink dress turned as an unseen man gripped the back of her chair. A solemn young man with light hair and blue eyes stands quietly, his steady gaze fixed ahead. A well-mannered man offered a wrapped gift, telling the uneasy girl she should play with this instead of cards, while she insisted she wasn't a child. A calm woman in a purple dress holding a stuffed bunny suggested to the serious man in armor that they finish the puzzle they started last time. Scattered puzzle pieces lay on the table as an observant and cautious figure reflected that the arrogant man kept his distance, only offering toys and advice. A serious man with dark hair carefully lit candles while a cheerful girl giggled, saying his concentrated face looked too funny for her to stay quiet. A concerned voice asked the princess to hold back from drinking. A cheerful man lifted a glass from the table while a surprised young woman protested that it was hers. A confident man leaned forward across the candlelit table, questioning why anyone would bother to keep something completely useless nearby. Someone off-panel challenged the royalty, saying it wouldn't help them. A young woman with braided hair muttered under her breath that someone was being unbearably arrogant. A solemn knight stood in the background, watching as an overwhelmed woman held her head in her hand. A quiet thought echoed. Someone wondered aloud if this is what having an uncle might be like. A young man with dark hair balanced a card on top of a delicate house of cards as a cheerful young woman in pink watched him. The narrator admitted letting their guard down too easily because they longed for someone to care. A young woman with braided hair beamed as playing cards drifted through the air around her. A hush filled the air as the narrator recalled the evening 4 days before their coming-of-age ceremony. Someone addressing a royal figure respectfully asked them to look at something. A confident man with slicked-back hair lifted a glowing artifact and remarked that everyone should admire how rare and marvelous it was. The dedicated and enthusiastic speaker eagerly told Your Highness they had finally found the puzzle and worked harder for it than any royal gift. A worried blonde woman carefully opened the door, her stern attendant watching closely from behind. Someone called out the name Magus into the emptiness. A dark-clothed man froze in the doorway as a woman in a white dress asked if he knew the time. A regretful visitor quietly explained they had to leave the capital sooner than planned, so they brought a birthday gift now despite the late hour. Then a young man with dark hair nervously scratched his head, gripping a wrapped gift box beneath the wide star-filled sky. A blonde woman with braided hair quietly asked if she could be forgiven for her earlier rudeness. Someone inside the castle reluctantly invited the visitor to enter and celebrated their decision. Someone inside the dim, book-filled study quietly admitted this was the first time anyone besides their guard and maid had ever been allowed in. Someone quietly stated that the only clean place is, leaving the thought unfinished. A confident man with a book suggested they head to the study. A silent collection of plaques and whimsical pins rests on the patterned surface, inviting a quiet sense of memory and meaning. The young woman with braided hair examines the cross pendant in her hands, her gaze fixed and searching. A young man with dark hair gazes affectionately at a blonde woman sitting across from him near the window. A long-haired woman leaned in with excitement and told the dark-haired man she had finally finished. The woman with braided blonde hair told the young man with dark hair that with the spire in place, everything else should come together quickly. A young man with dark hair holds the blonde woman's gaze as quiet intimacy settles between them across the table. The blue-eyed character stares straight ahead, realization flashing across their eyes. The blue-eyed character remains silent, their calm eyes fixed forward in quiet contemplation. A young man with dark hair grips the fabric in his hands, breathing hard from the effort. A young man with dark hair leaned in until his face hovered close to a woman, their legs brushing together beneath the table. A woman with long braided blonde hair moved her piece across the chessboard as a dark-haired man watched her next move in silence. A young man with dark hair watches as a blonde woman gently touches the model building between them, the candle flickering in the quiet room. A blonde girl with blue eyes glanced sideways, her worried expression giving away her anxious thoughts. The woman with long braided hair focused on the tablet, while the man with dark hair quietly observed from behind. A dark-haired man reached toward a blonde girl, quietly noting to himself that this was exactly where he needed to be. A blue-eyed figure studied the night sky, lost in quiet thought. A dark-haired man leaned over and gently kissed the head of a seated blonde woman, her gaze fixed downward in quiet sadness. A dark-haired man leaned in close behind a wide-eyed blonde woman, intimidating her as she gasped in shock. A pale, slender hand hovered over a striped gift box, hesitating in the dim blue light. A young man with dark hair grabs the waist of a long-haired woman, both of them tense and bracing for what comes next. A nervous girl whispered fearfully, her voice barely audible as she stared ahead, sweat trickling down her face. The dark-haired man locked his arms around the frightened blonde girl, and she begged him to let her go. A concerned man leaned over the seated woman and asked if her body was all right. The dark-haired man leaned in and breathed deeply near the blonde woman, saying the scent was so sweet it almost made him dizzy. The dark-haired man told the wide-eyed blonde girl that she used the same scented oil as her mother, mentioning Guinevere's hair smelled just like this. The intoxicated young man breathed in the woman's scent, quietly admitting that once someone experiences it, they find themselves endlessly seeking it again. The young man with dark hair pressed a beaded necklace to his chest, quietly admitting he couldn't stop searching for that feeling. Pieces of a shattered object tumbled through the sky as someone shouted in anguish, desperate to stop what was happening. A young man with dark hair knelt beside the unconscious woman, his hands trembling as he checked for any sign of life. Then the young man with dark hair pinned the blonde girl face down on the floor, his grip holding her there with unyielding determination. A worried young woman whispered that she needed to get away, murmuring the name Guinevere under her breath. A pale hand shot out across the dark patterned floor as someone insisted they had to escape. Still, the assertive and forceful figure clamped a wrist in their grasp, telling the restrained figure to get away. Still, the young man with dark hair reacted with sudden shock. Then the blue-tinted hand lunged forward, moving with urgent speed. The young man with dark hair forcefully pinned the blonde-haired woman to the patterned floor as her shoes slipped off. Pinned to the ground by a dark shape, the terrified blonde girl let out a sharp gasp. The wide-eyed girl fought to keep her eyes open, barely whispering that she needed to stay. Moments later, the young man with dark hair knelt beside the unconscious blonde-haired woman. Worry etched across his face. A pair of feet hovered just above the water, casting long shadows across the dimly lit room. A young man with dark hair leaned over the distressed woman and told her firmly to stay still. Suddenly, a forceful and dominant man pressed his lips to the shocked woman's, holding her face as she froze in surprise. The dark-clothed figure slammed the blonde woman down onto the patterned floor, pinning her as she let out a pained sound. A young man with dark hair pulled the braided-haired woman close and quietly confessed how much he had missed Guinevere. A young man with dark hair leaned over the trembling woman and told her she didn't need to shake so much. The reassuring and controlling presence told the distressed young man that the pain would only last a moment. Rain poured as the unnamed dark-haired figure clutched their head, overcome by anguish. Still, a restrained and vulnerable girl collapsed onto the cold floor in shock as ropes dug into her wrists. Still, the library's shadows deepened as ominous sounds echoed near the crackling fireplace. A crash thundered overhead as the young man with dark hair crouched low on the floor. Rain hammered down as the young man with grayish-blue hair dropped to his knees, blood splattering across the ground with a heavy thud. Moments later, a silver-haired man slammed his hands around a dark-haired man's throat while a frightened woman in a dress stared from across the room. Tears streamed down the blonde girl's face as she stared ahead in silent shock. A blonde young man knelt beside a wounded dark-haired man, who choked out weak sounds as pain racked his body. Suddenly, a hand gripped the dark-haired man's head with crushing force. A young man with light hair glared downward and sternly told Talia to go to her room. A young man with light hair seized an older man, who begged to be released and pleaded for a chance to talk before crying out in pain. Blood exploded as the injured man was stabbed in the back, while a shocked woman sat frozen nearby. A young man with light hair gazed downward, sorrow clouding his face as blood specks floated in the air around him. A frightened blonde woman struggled against the ropes and groaned, clutching her necklace tightly as fear overwhelmed her. A young man with light hair knelt desperately beside an unconscious dark-haired man, while a long-haired woman sat watching in the dim, chaotic room. A single intense blue eye glared forward, strands of hair casting thin shadows across its determined gaze. A solemn young man with light hair bowed his head, quietly repeating the names Talia, Roem and Greta to himself. A tearful girl looked anxiously to the side as an unseen voice ordered her to go to her room. A focused figure with an intense blue eye stared ahead, unwavering determination burning as strands of hair fell across their gaze. A young woman sat on the floor, clutching her chest as silent tears fell in the cold, somber room. A startled and alarmed young man gasped in disbelief. A young girl's eyes flew open, shock flashing across her face as she caught sight of something no one else could see. A tense figure crouched low, bracing themselves on the ground as the rope around their waist pulled tight. Then, a long-haired figure darted away from a kneeling man in the shadows, urgency driving every step. Someone called out for Cliff, their shout cutting through the rush of motion and tension. Warm golden light spills across an empty bedroom, the open doors hinting at secrets left behind. Still, a long-haired figure was sent tumbling backward into the darkness. A dark-haired man pins a distressed woman to the ground, and she cries out in pain and anger that it hurts and feels dirty. Then, a dark-haired person slams someone down, holding them in place with a surge of hostility. The young woman clapped a trembling hand over her mouth, terrified as she realized Varkas had spotted her. A trembling woman with long hair is gripped tightly by another's hand, her body shuddering as distress overwhelms her. Still, a teary-eyed girl with braided hair clutches herself as she struggles to hold back her distress. A long-haired woman in a gown drops to her knees and cries out that everything is terrible. Still, the tearful girl with braided hair clings desperately to the dark cloth, her body rigid with distress. Still, the tearful blonde girl with braided hair clutches the dark fabric, glancing back with fear and sorrow. A somber young man with light hair stands alone in the dim hall and quietly says the name Varkas.